Chapter 44. The Empress's eyes flickered between light and darkness. Still, despite her anger, she had no other choice since she was the one asking for help. She hid her anger and spoke kindly. Yunqi, how about this? Just say that Changping's sick. As for what illness it is, don't mention it. After all, it's not a good thing. So it won't be good if word gets out. Empress, my Mu Fei isn't an outsider. Naturally, she won't spread the news. Han Yunqi was a good daughter-in-law and immediately defended her mother-in-law. The Empress nodded and coaxed. Of course, but Changping's illness is contagious, and it's on her face. A girl hasn't married yet, so we have to leave her some face, don't you think? Han Yunqi looked understanding and nodded. Qinxia understands. Then we'll say that Changping has a heart fever and needs the 10-segment cicada slew to clear the heat and detoxify the poison. Just say it like that. You should make a trip yourself? The Empress probed. She'd already yielded so far, so there was no way she'd lower her face to beg Grand Concubine Yi. That would be too sullen. If Han Yunqi went, then there'd be no point in her doing this. She wouldn't go, but said, I still have to watch over the princess in case the poison becomes contagious. Esteemed Empress, there's no time to lose. You should find someone to go in my place. The Empress grew nervous again at the mention of contagious poison. Without a choice, she could only push the matter to Gu Beiwei. Gu Beiwei didn't express any opinions, but respectfully agreed. He immediately went to the Duke of Qin's estate to ask for the medicine. She didn't know how things were over at the Duke of Qin's estate the entire afternoon, but Gu Beiwei still hadn't returned. The Empress sat restlessly in the guest hall, waiting anxiously. Meanwhile, Han Yunqi was hiding in the kitchens, saying she was concentrating on making the antidote. She didn't want anyone to disturb her, but she'd long swapped out all the precious ingredients. She took out all the precious ingredients and the ones she didn't have in her detox system. Then she took out some common ingredients and mixed them all together. Right now, she was huddled by the stove to warm herself while pondering the situation at the Duke of Qin's estate. Grand Concubine had always thought that she'd lost face after being imprisoned. Now that she was giving her a chance to regain some face, she should be happy. Since Princess Changping was ill and needed the medicine, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't deny it. Han Yunqi was certain that Grand Concubine Yi would give her this medicine. Most likely, Murong Wanru would be disappointed to see her long-cherished dowry taken away. Thinking up to here, Han Yunqi was amused. But Han Yunqi never expected Grand Concubine Yi to enter the palace with Gu Beiwei at sunset. Even the Empress was very surprised and forced to smile to receive him. Grand Concubine Yi, it's only a single type of medicine. Changping can't afford to trouble you to deliver it personally. The Empress didn't ask any questions, but took the initiative to strike first. But Grand Concubine Yi's face was stern. Empress, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you're hiding such an important matter from even me? And here I thought Changping invited Yunqi to the palace to play. Who knew she was here to treat an illness? Before the Empress could explain, Grand Concubine Yi glanced at Han Yunqi and said, If I knew she was here to treat an illness, I wouldn't have let her come. What kind of medical skills does she have? Won't she just randomly prescribe medicine to treat Changping's illness? Han Yunqi lowered her head and didn't say a word. The Empress grew anxious and hastened to explain. How could that be? There's Imperial Physician Gu here to check things out. Imperial Physician Gu checks things out? Then let Imperial Physician Gu treat her. It'll be safe. Grand Concubine said, looking straight at Han Yunqi. She's just an ignorant and incompetent liar. If she knew how to treat illnesses, she wouldn't be called trash. Just a few days ago, she almost spent her whole life in jail. What can she treat? At these words, the Empress's face turned black. She was clearly taking deep breaths. Grand Concubine had come to find trouble today. Still, the Empress was the Empress. Her self-cultivation was excellent. She sighed helplessly. Aya, my esteemed Imperial Concubine, don't be so modest. Who dares to call Yunqi trash? I'll be the first to object. That matter with the young general was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Changping's already apologized. So a great person like you shouldn't bicker with a petty person. Grand Concubine was delighted to hear this and looked askance at her. Who doesn't know that Changping's bad temper came from spoiling her? Anger flashed past the Empress's eyes, but she held it in. She rose and bowed, half joking and half serious. Yes, yes, yes. It's Chinchia's fault. Chinchia will apologize to esteemed imperial concubine. Grand concubine Yi pretended to be nervous and hastened to support her. I can't accept it. I can't accept it. I was just joking. Which elder doesn't dote on a child? Take our family's Yunshi, for example. I still spoil her every day. Hearing the two women in the palace exchange false affections, Han Yunshi and Gu Beiyue both felt goosebumps rise on their skin as they looked at each other in silence. Still, Han Yunshi knew that her days back home wouldn't be as hard as before. Grand concubine Yi was enjoying herself to her heart's content. She had the mood and time to pretend, but the Empress didn't. She was worried about Princess Changping's infection period and didn't want to waste a second. Grand concubine Yi, Yunshi's medical skills don't lose to Imperial physician Gu's. I don't know what rumors are spreading outside to call her trash. As I see it, the Empress Dowager is right. The Duke of Qin married Yunshi and picked up a big bargain, the Empress said seriously. If this was the past, Grand concubine Yi would find these words ironic, but now she felt comfortable listening to them. She originally thought that there was something fishy about Han Yunshi curing the young general, but after Imperial physician Gu came to explain the situation in the afternoon, she was stunned. She never expected Han Yunshi's medical skills to be so good. Now it looked like the Empress Dowager regretted forcing the Duke of Qin to marry Han Yunshi. The Empress apologized and said good things, making Grand concubine Yi feel comfortable in her heart. She'd fought with the Empress Dowager for so many years, but it had been a long time since she'd felt so satisfied. Thus, she easily took out the 10-section cicada slew. She didn't give it to the Empress, but personally handed it to Han Yunshi with a kind tone. Yunshi, you have to be careful. I'll leave Princess Changping to you. Han Yunshi rose to accept it. Mufei, don't worry. Chinchia understands. Chinchia will go boil the medicine right away. Esteemed Wang Fei, this official will be your assistant, Gu Beiyue hastened to say. He knew Han Yunshi's prescription was fake and was curious to know what the real antidote was. The head imperial physician was going to be Han Yunshi's assistant? Grand concubine Yi was even happier as she chuckled. Imperial physician Gu, go. Hurry and go. But halfway there, Han Yunshi dismissed Gu Beiyue with a single sentence. Imperial physician Gu, why don't you go take a look at Princess Changping's? Gu Beiyue knew she didn't want him to follow. He hesitated, wanting to say something, but chose to remain silent in the end. With a smile, he said, this official obeys. But before he could leave, Han Yunshi turned back with a smile like a flower. Gu Beiyue, thanks. So speaking, she turned and left, leaving Gu Beiyue stunned. After a while, he helplessly shook his head, his smiling eyes as gentle as an April spring breeze. Han Yunshi went to the kitchens and took care of all the medicine she boiled before taking out the antidote from her medical pouch and boiling it into a decoction before personally carrying it out. The Empress and Grand Concubine Yi were both waiting by Princess Changping's door. Seeing Han Yunshi personally bring the medicine over, the Empress rejoiced. This is the medicine, right? Exactly. Han Yunshi nodded. The Empress personally opened the door, but didn't enter. She even stopped Grand Concubine Yi from entering. Esteemed Imperial Concubine, it smells of medicine inside. Changping's afraid of the wind and hasn't opened the windows in days. It's better if we wait outside. Grand Concubine Yi was a clean freak. Now that she smelled something wrong, she hesitated. That's fine too. Imperial physician Gu naturally followed them inside, leaving the Empress and Grand Concubine Yi outside. Although it was said to be curable, whether it was cured or not would depend on the final results. The Empress was very nervous. So was Grand Concubine Yi, who'd come all the way to the palace to show off her arrogance. But they ended up waiting for an hour before the Empress couldn't sit still any longer. Someone come. Go inside and see what's going on. Grand Concubine Yi furrowed her brows, thinking to herself, Han Yunshi, Han Yunshi. I came here today to gain face. If you make me lose face in the palace, I won't just starve you for a few days and nights when I get back. The court lady was afraid of being infected, but had no choice but to enter the room. Unexpectedly, the door opened from the inside just as she was about to enter. It was Gu Beiwei who opened the door with Han Yunxi behind him. Very soon, they saw the windows on both sides open as well. The Empress and Grand Concubine rose at the same time, speaking at the same time. How is it? The medicine has cured the illness. It's just that the princess has been tired out these past few days, and her body is very weak. She needs time to nurse herself back to health, Han Yunxi replied calmly. Really? The Empress's face was incredulous. Really? It's all better? Actually, she wanted to ask if it was still contagious. This was just Han Yunxi's mischievous prank. She nodded and said, Esteemed Empress, Changping must really want to see you. You should hurry inside. With Han Yunxi's words, the Empress's heart finally settled back down. Without a word, she entered the room. Grand Concubine felt that something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She hurried inside as well. Inside the room, Princess Changping's hands and feet had already been freed. Although her body was weak, her mind was abnormally excited. She was ordering a servant girl to bring her a mirror. Although her skin was rougher than before and there were scars on both sides of her face, it was still better than having a face full of poison. Although Imperial Physician Gu and Han Yunxi had both said that the scars on her face would take a few months to disappear, she was so excited that she didn't care about such details. Her face was healed and wouldn't be disfigured. She wouldn't infect others. Princess Changping didn't want to admit it, but it had to be said that Han Yunxi had saved her face for a lifetime. The Empress hurried back and covered her mouth in shock at the sight of Princess Changping's face. Heavens, it was true. All the imperial physicians and famous poison doctors couldn't treat her illness, but Han Yunxi's bowl of medicine had cured her, and the effects had been so quick. The Empress sat down and looked at her daughter's white face, so moved that she couldn't speak. But Grand Concubine was puzzled. Changping, you caught a fever. How did you injure your face? Wasn't it because she couldn't take it and scratched herself? The Empress hastened to find an excuse. Princess Changping was completely immersed in her joy as she stared fixedly at the mirror. She didn't pay attention to anyone who spoke. What, Yunxi didn't treat her while you were at it? Grand Concubine asked doubtfully. At this moment, the mama on the side spoke up. To reply, esteemed Imperial Concubine, Qin Wangfei prescribed some medicine for external use. She said it'd take a few months for her to fully recover. Grand Concubine was very satisfied as she smiled. That's good. Hee, Changping, it's your good fortune to have such an imperial aunt. Chapter 45. Good fortune? Princess Changping looked over and was about to speak when the Empress stopped her. Isn't that so? This is all thanks to Grand Imperial Concubine's medicine. Chunxie will definitely report this to the Empress Dowager and have her prepare a large gift to thank you both. The Empress didn't dare let the Empress Dowager know about this, but she knew that Grand Concubine wouldn't leave unless she did. This time, she'd had enough. Once Changping recovered, she really didn't want to see Grand Concubine and Han Yunxi again. Grand Concubine was flushed with success as she beamed from ear to ear. You're too polite, too polite. No need. Yunxi was even bestowed to the Duke of Qin's estate by the Empress Dowager. Han Yunxi explained a few more things to take note of before returning to the estate with Grand Concubine Seeing the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law leave hand in hand, the Empress stomped her feet angrily before turning to stride back into the rooms. Princess Changping was still immersed in her joy. How could she know how much her mother had suffered in order to save her? Changping, you better be careful when you do things in the future. This time, it wasn't just me, but your imperial grandmother's face as well. You didn't see how smug Grand Concubine was. The Empress was panting with rage. Only then did Princess Changping have the servants take away the mirror. Muhu, you can't blame me for this. Isn't it all Han Yunxi's fault? If not for her, I never would have gone to a damned place like the imperial prisons. It's only right that she saved me. Don't expect me to repay her. You're still talking? When have you ever made Muhu feel at ease with your work? The Empress roared. Princess Changping was startled. She'd never been yelled at by Muhu before. I. Princess Changping trailed off. Princess Changping thought for a moment. Imperial Mother, Who knows if she was the one who poisoned me? I've long suspected that she was the one who poisoned Qingwu Gij as well. Otherwise, how could a good-for-nothing like her suddenly become so powerful? Of course, only she could cure her own poison. At these words, the Empress was on guard. A good-for-nothing like Han Yunqi suddenly becoming a genius was truly unimaginable. Imperial Mother, why don't we test her again? Princess Chongping hurriedly suggested. The Empress's cold eyes deepened and a scheming look flashed through her eyes. Even if Han Yunqi was married, she was still a member of the Han family and the daughter of divine Dr. Han. Perhaps she could discuss with the Empress Dowager. As soon as they left the palace, Grand Concubine Yi released Han Yunqi's hand. Han Yunqi wasn't surprised. She knew that as the daughter of the Empress Dowager's benefactor, she was Grand Concubine Yi's enemy. She didn't expect the Grand Concubine to treat her like her own daughter, but she wanted less trouble. Once inside the carriage, Grand Concubine Yi's first words were, "Where did you learn your medical skills?" Han Yunqi was answering Long Fei Yi the same way she answered Grand Concubine Yi back then. No matter who asked, she'd give the same answer. Whether it was Long Fei Yi or Grand Concubine Yi, they'd both investigated her beforehand. They wouldn't be able to find any flaws in her behavior in the Han family, and they wouldn't be able to find any clues here. Grand Concubine Yi's face turned gloomy at the mention of Lady Tianxin. She didn't pursue the matter, nor did she pursue the matter of her imprisonment in the imperial prisons. Murong Wanru was waiting by the gates, her usually quiet and obedient face now terrifyingly gloomy. Her heart had been stifled for half a day. The 10-section cicada slough was the dowry she'd been looking forward to ever since she was young. She never expected to lose it all because of Han Yunqi's prescription. In the past, no matter how much she hated people, she could always smile naturally. But facing Han Yunqi, she almost couldn't do it. Seeing Grand Concubine Yi and Han Yunqi approach from afar, Murong Wanru couldn't stop taking deep breaths. It took a long time for her to calm down. She strode forward with a face full of concern. "Sister-in-law, how was it? The Empress and Princess didn't make things difficult for you, did they?" Han Yunqi's lips rose into a cold smile as she said mildly, "Mu Fei's already gone. How could they dare to make things difficult for me? Mu Fei would lose face." These words gave Murong Wanru a start, and she hastened to explain. "Mu Fei, that's not what I meant. I'm just worried about sister-in-law." Her aggrieved expression made Han Yunqi feel like she'd really bullied her. Grand Concubine Yi pursed her lips, a little impatient. "Han Yunqi, it's good that you know how to take care of my face. In the future, on the 1st of every month, come to the accounts to get your allowance. As a Wang Fei, you need to act like one. Look at how poor you look." So speaking, she disdainfully sized her up from head to toe before turning to leave. But Murong Wanru was left dumbfounded. Mu Fei was actually going to give Han Yunqi her allowance? With that, Han Yunqi would have even more freedom. Then how was she supposed to make things difficult for Han Yunqi in the future? Murong Wanru couldn't accept it. She couldn't maintain her docile expression any longer as her face grew taut. "Little sister, I heard the 10 segments of the cicada slough was your dowry. It can't be true, right?" Han Yunqi asked her on purpose. "You." Murong Wanru was so angry that tears rolled down her cheeks. With a snort, she turned and ran off. Seeing this, Han Yunqi laughed out loud. "Murong Wanru, Murong Wanru. Sooner or later, I'll beat you back to your original form." After taking care of Murong Wanru, Han Yunqi thought of the precious ingredients she brought back from the palace and felt even better. She skipped all the way back to the hibiscus courtyard, but as soon as she reached the gardens, she ran into the giant iceberg, Long Fei Yi. When did this guy come back? This guy who appeared and disappeared like a ghost seemed to always come back for business. Last time, he'd asked her for an antidote. Just whose poison did he want to cure? And that time when he was poisoned, what was that about? According to Han Yunqi's understanding, Long Fei Ye's martial arts weren't bad. The person who could injure him couldn't be weak either. Han Yunqi unconsciously stopped and looked into the distance. She saw Long Fei Yi sitting among the flowers, drinking tea by himself. With his cold, hard lines and sharp features, even if he was just sitting there casually, the aura he exuded from his every movement was so elegant and noble like a lofty king. One person and one cup of tea formed a world of their own that no one could enter. Han Yunshi unconsciously stared at him in a daze again. It wasn't until a piercingly cold gaze shot over that she abruptly came back to her senses. Long Fei looked directly at her from afar. Han Yunshi reflexively showed a friendly smile. "You're back?" But she quickly regretted it. What did his return have to do with her? With a fake smile, Han Yunshi turned to leave. Long Fei domineeringly ordered, "Come here." Han Yunshi ignored him and continued walking. "This prince has been waiting for you for a long time." Long Fei's voice became unyielding. "Waiting for her? To cure the poison again?" "All right." Han Yunshi admitted that she was a little curious, but also a little afraid of his strength. She turned back and sat down in front of Long Fei. Long Fei opened his mouth and asked, "Princess Chomping's matter has been resolved?" He knew? "Your Highness's information is really fast," Han Yunshi said. Long Fei didn't pursue the matter and indifferently said, "Rest early. Come out with me early tomorrow morning." This guy wanted to take her out? To do what? Han Yunshi was curious. Things like going to a banquet or meeting friends. Han Yunshi didn't have any extravagant requests. To cure the poison. Long Fei's words were concise and comprehensive. It was this again. Han Yunshi really wanted to tell him that she might as well quit being his Wang Fei and change professions to become his personal poison doctor. Faced with this question of changing professions, Han Yunshi's attitude was still very professional. "Cure what kind of poison? You'll know when you get there," Long Fei said. Han Yunshi nodded. "I want to pay the consultation fee." Long Fei's face was full of disdain, and he wasn't even willing to answer. He only nodded and got up to leave. After taking 2 steps, he said, "I'll come find you tomorrow morning at 3 in the morning." Han Yunshi was about to nod when she suddenly froze. "Wait, 3 in the morning?" 3 in the morning was between 3 in the morning to 5 in the morning. In the eyes of the ancients, this was considered the morning of the next day. But in Han Yunshi's eyes, this was the middle of the night. Waking up early in the winter was the most painful thing, not to mention going out. Han Yunshi's face was pale. She quickly chased after him. "You can either go tonight or go tomorrow after the sun comes up." "I can't go this early." "Why?" Long Fei asked with a frown. Han Yunshi only replied with one word. "Cold." "I'll pay double the consultation fee." Long Fei was very generous, but who knew that Han Yunshi's attitude was firm? "I won't go even if it's 10 times the price." At this moment, Long Fei turned his head and asked, "Han Yunshi, is there any poison that you don't know how to cure?" Han Yunshi was slightly taken aback, but then she replied with a serious attitude, "That's hard to say. There are countless types of poisons in the world. Under the same type, there are countless branches. Even if it's the same type of poison, depending on the depth of the poison, the time of poisoning, and the person's physical condition, the antidote will be different. So, Xinxia can't give you a definite answer." Long Fei listened attentively, then asked again, "What if it's not a person poisoned? Is it an animal poisoned?" Han Yunshi was puzzled. The first thing that came to mind was this guy's horse. Otherwise, what other animal could he keep? But, to save his horse, he didn't have to go out in the middle of the night, did he? Unexpectedly, Long Fei didn't answer, but said indifferently, "You'll know when you go. Rest early. I'll come and find you at 3 in the morning." With that, he left. Han Yunshi chased after him for a few steps, but couldn't catch up. "Hey, what's going on? What was it that was poisoned? Tell me clearly. If you don't tell me, I'm really not going." No matter how Han Yunshi threatened him, Long Fei didn't look back. Soon, his figure was submerged in the bushes. Han Yunshi was stunned on the spot. She was depressed. What kind of poison was it? What kind of inhuman thing was poisoned? Did he have to keep her in suspense like this? Did she want to go or not? As a senior poison doctor, she had a very strong professional curiosity. In the modern era, she had studied almost all the poisonous bacteria that she could get her hands on. Now that she was in the ancient era, she had a childlike desire to know more about the poisonous bacteria and toxins that were extinct in the modern era. Long Fei was being so mysterious. Just what was going on? That night, Han Yunshi tossed and turned restlessly in bed. Time passed unknowingly. Dong dong dong. The strong knocking sound woke Han Yunxi, who had just fallen asleep. Looking at the hourglass, it was 3 in the morning. Han Yunxi wore the thickest clothes in the wardrobe, but it still couldn't warm her up. As soon as the door opened, Long Fei's lofty, mountain-like body blocked most of it. Still, the bone-chilling wind still managed to find its way in. She hadn't even stepped out of the threshold before her teeth started chattering. She hurriedly hid by the door. She had a small physique, and with her hands in her sleeves and her neck shrunk, she appeared even smaller. Long Fei looked at her pitiful appearance from high above, and his lips curled into a disdainful smile. This woman was really weak. Are you still going? Coldly, he asked, who knew that when Han Yunxi raised her head, her face was deathly pale. However, that pair of bright eyes sparkled with stubbornness. She was so cold that her lips were trembling, but her voice didn't tremble. Go, of course I'm going. 300 taels, not a single tael less. Long Fei's heart jolted slightly. He had to admit that every single word in this reply was out of his expectations. Chapter 46. Long Fei's eyes flashed with admiration that even he himself didn't realize. He took out the money pouch and threw it to Han Yunxi. However, Han Yunxi threw it back and said seriously, "It's not too late to accept it when you see the poison." She was a little woman who loved money but wasn't greedy. Long Fei didn't say anything and just turned to leave. Han Yunxi hurriedly followed him out. Oh my! The wind outside was so strong. It was more than twice as cold as the room. Long Fei walked very quickly. Han Yunxi trotted behind him, thinking that they could take a carriage after they got out of the door, right? But who knew that Long Fei would stop at the entrance of Hibiscus Courtyard? Han Yunxi hid behind him to avoid the wind. She shivered and asked, "What's wrong?" Unexpectedly, Long Fei turned around and opened his arms to raise his large cloak. He said coldly and domineeringly, "Come in." The wind made his cloak flutter. In the dark night, his features were cold and resolute. His brows were sharp like knives. He was like a god of darkness, looking down at her from high above. Han Yunxi was stunned. She didn't understand what this meant. Long Fei didn't have that much patience. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace, placing her under his arm. His hand closed, and the large cloak wrapped around her tightly, blocking the invasion of the cold wind. In that instant, Han Yunxi's heart thumped and sped up. She panicked. Oh my God! His body was so warm and exuded the mesmerizing scent of ambergris. Was this what it felt like to be under the wings of an angel? It was so warm. Before Han Yunxi could recover her wits, Long Fei had already wrapped his arms around her. With a light tap of his feet, they flew towards the northwest of the capital city. Han Yunxi wrapped herself in a cloak and snuggled into Long Fei's warm embrace. She followed Long Fei as they flew through the air. Their speed was even faster than riding a horse. In the dark night, other than the occasional flickering lights, she couldn't see anything clearly. She didn't know where he was taking her, but she was very relieved. Although her body was warm, the wind blowing against her face was cold and sharp like a knife. Soon, Han Yunxi couldn't stand it anymore. She turned her face sideways and lowered her head, but she couldn't avoid it. In the end, she had no choice but to carefully turn her body sideways. She moved a little. Seeing that Long Fei did not respond, she became bolder. She stretched her arms behind him and leaned to the side, burying her head in his body. This time, she was finally completely warm. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't nervous. She stiffened for a while. Seeing that Long Fei didn't have any objections, she slowly relaxed and enjoyed the warmth. Long Fei kept his eyes forward as he maintained his speed. Still, his lips had somehow curved into a curve as well, as if he disdained her cowardice. It was as if he was toying with her boldness, just like his deep, dark eyes, mysterious and enchanting. It was hard to fathom what he was thinking. He led her over walls and over mountains. She could only feel the wind whizzing past her. She was oblivious to everything around her. Unknowingly, she became sleepy and fell into a daze. It wasn't until Long Fei brought her down and stood on the ground that she woke up. She poked her head out of his embrace and found herself on a high cliff. It was early in the morning. Long Fei looked down. You can let go now. She was stunned. Only then did she realize that this guy had let go of her a long time ago. Her hands had hugged his waist from behind. Han Yunxi blushed. As if she had been electrocuted, she hurriedly retracted her arms and struggled out of his wide cloak. The moment she left his protection, the cold attacked her from all directions. However, Han Yunxi still felt that her face was very, very hot. She didn't look at him and tried her best to ignore the awkwardness. She said mildly, "What are we doing here?" Long Fei looked at the sky and said, "Wait for another 15 minutes. Strange. Why did this guy bring her here? Wasn't he here to cure the poison? Would someone come in another 15 minutes? Han Yunxi didn't ask any more questions. She looked around and realized that there were towering mountains and precipitous ridges around her. She couldn't tell where she was, and below the cliff was an abyss. The morning fog hadn't dispersed yet, so she couldn't see the bottom. The sun had already risen, and the white sky was dyed golden. It was a spectacular sight. Han Yunxi hadn't seen the sunrise in a long time. She was lost in thought when a beeping sound suddenly sounded in her mind. Poison? Judging from the rhythm and volume of the beeping sound, this poison wasn't ordinary. It was very large. Han Yunxi was alert. She turned to look at Long Fei, who was also watching the sunrise. There's poison nearby. What's going on? Long Fei was a little surprised. How did you know? This poison is very strange. Tell me what's going on. Han Yunxi was serious. At this moment, Long Fei looked down at the abyss. This abyss is filled with poisonous fog all year round. It sinks to the bottom of the abyss at night and floats up when the sun rises. Han Yunxi was very surprised. She didn't expect that it wasn't humans or animals that were poisoned, but the air. Do you want to go down? Han Yunxi asked. There's a spy from the northernly country hiding below. He's good at using poison. Long Fei said lightly. So that's how it was. He came to capture people, but he was blocked by the poisonous fog and couldn't go down. Han Yunxi watched the white fog slowly rising. Her beautiful eyebrows slowly knitted together. It seemed that things weren't as Long Fei thought. Can you do it? Long Fei asked. At this moment, a quarter of an hour was up. She saw a cloud of black gas faintly appear in the white fog. The alarm in Han Yunxi's head reached the highest level. However, very quickly, the black gas drifted back into the valley and disappeared. See, this cloud of black gas is the most poisonous, Long Fei said lightly. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi said, this isn't poisonous fog. The poisonous fog that Long Fei spoke of was actually miasma. It was the foul air of the mountains and forests, appearing at the end of spring and disappearing at the end of autumn. If there wasn't enough temperature, miasma wouldn't form. Now that it was winter, even the places where the sun shone on the mountaintop were freezing to death, to say nothing of the shady valley. Then what is it? Long Fei was alarmed. He had once sent a group of elite soldiers down there, but half of them died before they could find the person. Those who escaped said there was miasma down there, so it wasn't long before they all died of poison. The spy hiding in the valley held important military secrets of Tianing country in his hands. If he escaped, the consequences would be unthinkable. He'd already chased after him for more than a month. Last time, he'd been poisoned because of that spy. This spy was very treacherous. He'd waited until the last moment to use his poison skills. Before that, no one knew he could use poison. Long Fei had chased him all the way here, but the spy had hidden himself in the sealed valley and hadn't come out again. It should be a poisonous mosquito swarm. Han Yunxi was surprised as well. She hadn't expected to run into something like this. Many ancient texts had recorded that when a cloud of miasma floated past, people would die of poison. This cloud of miasma was then called miasma. But in reality, that black cloud of miasma wasn't real miasma, but a large number of mosquitoes flying together. The ancients mistook it for miasma. These mosquitoes carried the bacteria of malignant malaria. If humans and animals were bitten by them, they'd be infected and die quickly. It was like being poisoned. Under these conditions, it was impossible for a poisonous miasma to form, but it was very possible that there was a swarm of poisonous mosquitoes hidden in the valley fog. poisonous mosquito swarm? This was the first time Long Fei had heard of this term. The white fog isn't poisonous. That cloud of black miasma is the poisonous mosquito swarm. When there's not enough light, it looks like black miasma, so you've all misunderstood. Han Yunqi explained seriously, then said, "Take me down. I have to get close to that cloud of black miasma to know what kind of poisonous mosquito it is." In modern times, there were countless types of poisonous mosquitoes, not to mention in ancient times. Many of them had not gone extinct, so there were definitely more of them than in modern times. Han Yunqi had to determine whether she could recognize them or not, and whether she could make an effective mosquito repellent. After confirming that the white fog wasn't poisonous, everything was simple for Long Fei Yi. Without saying anything, he grabbed Han Yunqi's waist and jumped down. As soon as they entered the valley, Han Yunqi's detoxification system detected the presence of poison. Soon, she determined the direction. "It's on the right." Long Fei Yi hugged her tightly and flew over in an instant. However, not long after, the detoxification system reminded them that there was poison on the left as well. Could it be that there was more than one swarm? Han Yunqi was shocked. Who knew that at this time, the detoxification system's emergency warning came from above and below? Heavens, above, below, left, and right. Was this the rhythm of surrounding them? "We're surrounded," Han Yunqi whispered. Before she could finish speaking, Long Fei Yi saw a black, fog-like thing rapidly encircling them from all directions. Long Fei Yi didn't expect there to be 4 swarms, but he was very calm. "How close do we have to be to detect the poison? Hurry up and leave. It's too dangerous. They're very fast." Han Yunqi made a prompt decision to escape. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi coldly said, "Answer this prince's question. 10 steps, 10 steps away. I can determine what poison it is." Han Yunqi answered truthfully, 10 steps. Based on the current speed of the poisonous mosquito swarm, after 10 steps, they would be able to reach them in an instant. Moreover, they were surrounded from above, below, left, and right. In other words, when the poisonous mosquito swarm was 10 steps away from them, they would be submerged in the black fog in an instant. Han Yunqi didn't even dare to think about it. She still didn't know what kind of poison the poisonous mosquito swarm carried, and she wasn't sure if she could neutralize it. Moreover, if she was poisoned, what would she do? Just as she was feeling nervous, Long Fei Yi only said 2 words, "Wait." "No," Han Yunqi shouted. She watched as the poisonous mosquito swarm came closer and closer. She seemed to be able to hear that terrifying and annoying buzzing sound. "Prepare to be tested," Long Fei Yi tyrannically ordered. This wasn't an ordinary poison, but a poisonous mosquito swarm. For large swarms of poisonous mosquito swarm, being swept by them was more terrifying than being galloped by a large herd of antelopes. They would be covered in cuts and bruises. Han Yunqi admitted that she was timid. She shouted, "No, I'm scared." However, Long Fei Yi suddenly pulled her into his arms and coldly said, "With this prince here, you're not allowed to be scared." So domineering. So domineering. Han Yunqi hated arrogant, overbearing, and unreasonable men the most. However, at this moment, she didn't feel any disgust at all. Her heart thumped wildly, and she calmed down for no reason. This man's domineering aura gave people a sense of security. At this moment, the poisonous mosquito swarm from above, below, left, and right approached at the same time. "Are you ready?" Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. After calming down, Han Yunqi brought out her professional standards and fully activated the scanning system. She constantly paid attention to the movements of the black swarm in all 4 directions. She also said in a low voice, "Ready?" Chapter 47. Right at this moment, the venomous mosquito swarms that were flying towards them from all directions suddenly stopped. Han Yunqi knew that this was a sign that they were about to attack. She quickly scanned her surroundings and made a prompt decision. "Let's go." Sure enough, after a second of pause, the venomous mosquito swarmed towards them from all directions. In an instant, Long Fei Yi pressed his hand down and pulled Han Yunqi into his embrace. He raised his cloak and wrapped it tightly around her. Then, His figure flashed and turned into a lightning-fast figure, passing through the gap between two black shadows. A second faster was too fast, and a second slower was too slow. Just as Long Fei Yi passed through the narrow gap, the four swarms of venomous mosquito swarms merged into a large group and chased after them crazily. Long Fei Yi didn't stop and quickly flew up the cliff. The venomous mosquito swarms chased after them relentlessly. As they chased, the large group could even transform into the shape of a sharp arrow to increase their speed and attack. Han Yunqi was tightly wrapped in the cloak and not a single inch of her skin was exposed. However, she could hear the deafening buzzing sound, which meant that the venomous mosquito swarms were very close to them. Moreover, they were angry to make such loud noises. Han Yunqi really wanted to poke her head out to see what was going on. Were they almost at the cliff? However, just as she was thinking, her feet suddenly landed on the ground. They're up? Han Yunqi was overjoyed. She struggled free from Long Fei Ye's arm and pulled down the cloak to take a look. In the abyss, a large group of venomous mosquito swarms were hovering around, not daring to come up. Not long after, they were gradually submerged in the abyss. Han Yunqi turned back to look at Long Fei Yi and smiled sweetly under the sunlight. Long Fei Yi, you're amazing. Han Yunqi's back was facing the sunlight and her entire body was covered with a layer of faint golden glow. Her sweet smile was like a flower blooming in the sunlight. Long Fei Yi looked at her, and time seemed to have stopped at this moment. However, he quickly threw out a sentence coldly. Coward. Han Yunqi immediately stopped smiling. She pulled the corners of her mouth and rolled her eyes, too lazy to argue with him. The information that she had just scanned was still stored in the detoxification system. She was so frightened that she didn't have time to retrieve it. She turned around and closed her eyes to take a deep breath. The detoxification system was tied to her consciousness. If she was too messy, the detoxification system would also be messed up. Have you figured out what poison it is? Long Fei urged. He thought that Han Yunqi had only to see and smell it. Han Yunqi quickly organized her thoughts and turned around. She said in all seriousness, Your Highness, congratulations. The four groups of poisonous mosquitoes are of the same type. They are called spider mosquitoes, which means that they carry the same venom. There is only one type of venom that is the same as the spider black widow's venom. It is commonly known as the widow's venom. She didn't know if Han Yunqi was lucky or if Long Fei Yi was lucky. Han Yunqi had studied these strange spider mosquitoes in the modern era. This was a very strange phenomenon. Mosquitoes and spiders had the same venom. Without a doubt, Han Yunqi's detoxification system had medicine. Not only did it have the antidote, it also had a special mosquito-killing liquid. Hearing Han Yunqi say this, Long Fei Yi nodded and asked, How long do you need to make the antidote? Guess. Han Yunqi smiled. She was naturally in a good mood because she had medicine prepared. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi slowly narrowed his dangerous eyes. All right, no matter how good her mood was, she shouldn't joke with this iceberg. She would freeze to death. I have it now, Han Yunqi said coldly. Seeing Long Fei Yi raise his eyebrows in disbelief, she snorted lightly and took out 2 bottles of spray medicine and a box of antidote from her medical bag. Long Fei Yi looked at this strange thing. His handsome brows furrowed even tighter, and he looked puzzled. Han Yunqi laughed inwardly. It was rare to see this iceberg with this kind of expression. She had to admit that his knitted brows were so charming. This is the antidote. This is the mosquito-killing liquid. After taking the antidote, it will take effect for 2 hours. Even if you are bitten, you will be fine. It will only leave a wound. This liquid can kill those mosquitoes. Of course, if you don't mind being dirty, you can slap them to death. As Han Yunqi explained, she demonstrated it herself. With a light press, the liquid sprayed out, releasing a faint, fragrant scent. Long Fei Yi seriously listened and watched. Although this spray medicine was too unfamiliar to him, he quickly learned how to use it. Han Yunqi found for the first time that this man was the most charming when he was serious. Only, Long Fei Yi quickly recovered his expressionless face. Where did you get these things? Widow's poison is a very common poison. Of course I have a backup, Han Yunqi calmly replied. Who cared if he believed it or not? You prepared it so coincidentally? Long Fei asked again. Han Yunqi handed over the antidote. Do you want it or not? Long Fei finally gave up. He took the antidote and casually handed the cloak to Han Yunqi. I'm not cold anymore. There's no need. Han Yunqi returned it. But Long Fei stuffed it back. This prince won't be responsible if you're disfigured. So when they just escaped, at that critical moment, he still cared about wrapping her up tightly, afraid that she would be bitten? All right, if she was disfigured, he would lose face. She was once an ugly girl and had already lost face for him for several years. Han Yunqi ignored the warmth in her heart. After taking the antidote, she wrapped the cloak tightly around herself and put on the hood, covering most of her face. She had just finished tidying herself up when Long Fei's strong arms wrapped around her. Just like the previous few times, he wrapped his arms around her small waist. Although they were separated by thick clothes, Han Yunqi could clearly feel the temperature of his palms. It was very, very hot. It was unimaginable that such a cold man actually had a pair of warm hands. The poisonous mosquitoes were indeed smarter than ordinary mosquitoes. Long Fei had just brought Han Yunqi down the abyss when the 4 groups of poisonous mosquitoes once again surrounded them from 4 directions. This time round, their speed was even faster than before, as though they were specially waiting for them to come down. Who knew that not only did Long Fei not avoid them, instead he flew towards the black mass of poisonous mosquitoes. Han Yunqi had not expected that this fellow would play in this way. Although she had immunity and had the protection of the anti-mosquito medication, but being drowned in the black mass of mosquitoes, Han Yunqi's heart still couldn't help but beat faster. It was too scary, too disgusting. Although she had wrapped her entire head with the cloak, but she could clearly feel a large swarm of mosquitoes flying towards her and crawling all over her body. The buzzing sound made her feel so stifled that she almost couldn't breathe. She didn't even bother to use the anti-mosquito medication. But very quickly, all the stifling feeling disappeared. Long Fei carried her and speedily passed through the poisonous mosquito swarm, distancing themselves from them. Han Yunqi popped her head out and took in a deep breath of fresh air. She realized that the 4 groups of poisonous mosquitoes had already merged into one and were right in front of them. As though they had discovered that they were immune, the poisonous mosquito swarm wasn't as arrogant as before. Instead, they faced off against them and didn't move forward. Mosquitoes also have self-awareness, Han Yunqi joked. However, Long Fei didn't say a word as he hugged her tightly and suddenly flew towards the poisonous mosquito swarm. This time round, he didn't just simply pass through, but he stopped abruptly in front of the black fog and picked up the anti-mosquito medication to spray it. With this spray, a small piece of the black fog was immediately destroyed. The poisonous mosquitoes at the back were frightened and started to retreat. Seeing this, Han Yunqi was overjoyed. She also took out the anti-mosquito medication and sprayed it at the black fog. Every time she sprayed it, a piece of the black fog would be destroyed. She didn't know if the poisonous mosquitoes were scared silly as they stopped in midair and didn't escape. The more Han Yunqi sprayed it, the more excited she became. She reached into her medical bag, which was actually the detoxification system, and took out a bottle of spray medicine. With one bottle in her left hand and one in her right hand, she swept it with both hands, looking very dashing. Very quickly, a large piece of the black fog disappeared and the poisonous mosquitoes fell to the ground. Finally, the poisonous mosquitoes that had been invincible all this time reacted and ran for their lives. The black fog dissipated in an instant. Han Yunqi was overjoyed and laughed loudly. Korean-style ultimate kill. Long Fei tilted his head and looked down disdainfully. He stared at her as if she was his prey. Han Yunqi only felt a chill on her scalp. She subconsciously raised her head and immediately met his deep gaze. She was slightly stunned and immediately restrained her smile. Smiling at someone who didn't know how to smile was simply a waste of her mood. Long Fei retracted his gaze and didn't say anything. This abyss was sealed in the shape of an inverted V. It was surrounded by barren cliffs and could be seen at a glance. There was no way to hide anyone. Therefore, the spy from northernly country could only hide at the bottom of the abyss. Long Fei brought Han Yunqi and swooped down without any obstacles. The bottom of the abyss was a barren pile of rocks and not a single blade of grass grew. They landed on the tallest rock. Long Fei Yi didn't let go of Han Yunqi from beginning to end. That pair of sharp black eyes coldly scanned the surroundings. Suddenly, a figure appeared out of thin air and landed on the rock opposite them. It was the northerly spy that Long Fei Yi wanted to capture. However, contrary to Han Yunqi's expectations, this spy was actually a woman. Moreover, it was a delicate woman. She wasn't tall, but her figure wasn't bad. Her curves were graceful and curvaceous. It could be said that she was the best of the best. Her facial features were delicate and beautiful, even softer than Murong Wanru's. Even if she didn't speak, she gave people a delicate feeling that she was too weak to stand up to a gust of wind. When encountering such a woman, not to mention men, even women would have an inexplicable desire to protect her. As soon as she appeared, her eyes were filled with tears as she pitifully pleaded, "Duke of Qin, this servant was wrong. This servant won't dare to do it again. Please spare this servant this time. Duke of Qin, please spare this servant. This servant will do whatever you want." Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi had never been a person who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. He didn't even waste words as he let go of Han Yunqi and drew his sword. Seeing that her pleas were useless, the female spy immediately turned hostile. Her malicious gaze swept past Han Yunqi as she immediately drew her sword and prepared to defend herself. Just as she was about to draw her sword, Han Yunqi whispered, "Be careful, her sword is poisoned." Long Fei Yi knew that he wouldn't suffer a second time after suffering once. If he had known earlier that this woman could use poison, he wouldn't have been careless and injured last time. "Long Fei Yi, I'm very surprised that you were able to come down, but I guarantee that you won't be able to go back up again." As the female spy spoke, she didn't attack, but turned to flee. Long Fei Yi raised his sword and chased after her. His speed was as fast as lightning, and he landed in front of the female spy in a moment. He was still that taciturn and didn't say a single word. He raised his sword and attacked. However, at this moment, the female spy suddenly dodged and blew an incomparably sharp whistle that resounded through the entire valley. Chapter 48. There was a long whistle. Suddenly, clouds of black fog appeared from all directions, covering the skies and covering the earth. It was as if they wanted to cover the entire sky. A poisonous mosquito swarm. She didn't expect there to be so many of them, and they all obeyed this woman. Han Yunqi was alarmed. She could actually control poisonous mosquitoes. No wonder this woman could hurt Long Fei Yi. She had some skills. The woman whistled again. Suddenly, all of the black fog surged towards Han Yunqi like a huge wave. "Long Fei Yi, if you don't want that woman to die, you'd better protect my life," the female spy threatened as she retreated. She'd been hiding in Tianing country for so long, but she'd never seen Long Fei Yi touch a woman. He rarely even spoke to a woman, much less held one in his arms. Today, he'd actually brought this woman here and held her in his arms. Even in a life-and-death situation, she couldn't help but be astonished. Who was this woman? What kind of weight did she have in Long Fei Yi's heart? Just as the black mass was about to drown her, Han Yunqi glanced at Long Fei Yi and suddenly screamed, "Ah, I'm so scared. Too scary. Your Highness, save me. Hurry and save me." Sob, sob. "So disgusting. Your Highness, I'm so scared." She screamed as she flailed her arms and legs wildly. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with astonishment, but he quickly understood. His lips curved into a helpless smile that even he didn't notice. Seeing this, the female spy grew smug and gave a cold snort. "Long Fei Yi, I'm sure you've seen quite a few of your subordinates poisoned, right? Your Highness, she's threatening you. How scary." Han Yunqi said anxiously. Long Fei had always wanted to end his battles quickly, even in the face of large-scale battles. He wouldn't waste any time on his enemies. However, in the face of the female spy's threat, he was surprisingly patient, which also made the female spy relax her vigilance and did not suspect Han Yunqi. She was full of confidence. She raised her eyebrows and sneered, "Long Fei Yi, if I die, she will die too. Also, You can forget about leaving this valley. Unfortunately, Long Fei Ye's patience is always limited. His handsome cold face showed displeasure. In an instant, the long sword was on the neck of the female spy. You. The female spy was shocked and angrily warned. Long Fei Yi, have you thought it through? Long Fei Yi finally opened his mouth, his tone cold and merciless. This prince will let you die, with grievances. As soon as his voice fell, Han Yunqi very tacitly stopped, the corners of her lips hooked up into a sly smile. Seeing this, the female spy suddenly felt uneasy. Unfortunately, it was too late. She saw Han Yunqi take out 2 bottles of mosquito-killing agent. Like a princess in a fairy tale, she raised one leg and elegantly turned around on the spot. She also sprayed a circle of agent at the same time. She saw the circle of black shadows shrink back. The female spy was dumbstruck, not knowing what was in Han Yunqi's hands. Han Yunqi elegantly turned around a few more times and lightly waved her hand. Very quickly, the surrounding black shadows all retreated and quickly flowed away. The female spy was flustered and exasperated. She didn't care about the sword on her neck and hurriedly whistled. However, no matter how she whistled, it was useless. Compared to obeying orders, the poisonous mosquito wanted to save her life more. The female spy tried several times, but in the end, she was in despair. She looked at Han Yunqi in disbelief and asked, What is that in your hands? Han Yunqi walked over, smiling with a harmless face. His Highness said that he wants you to die with everlasting regret. Sorry, I can't tell you. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Fei's sword no longer held back. With a light flick, he sent a splash of fresh blood into the air. The female spy fell to the ground, her eyes wide open. Even in death, she didn't know how Han Yunqi had driven away the mosquitoes. Han Yunqi squatted down and carefully scanned the long sword. She found that the poison on the sword was indeed the snake poison that Long Fei had been poisoned by before. It seemed that this guy had been chasing this female spy for a long time. Previously, he asked her for the antidote because of this matter. The northernly country's spy knew how to use poison. Han Yunqi felt that this matter shouldn't be simple. You can tell that there's poison on her sword just by looking? Long Fei asked in puzzlement. There were a lot of poisonous mosquitoes, and they also had a smell. Han Yunqi could smell it, and it wasn't unbelievable. But this long sword. Han Yunqi stood up and calmly said, I can smell it. If Long Fei believed her, then he would be a fool. Coldly, he looked at her and didn't say a word. Han Yunqi helplessly shrugged her shoulders. Actually, since I was young, I've been gifted. I'm very sensitive to poison. It's a pity that my father and the rest don't know about it. As she spoke, she sighed. Sigh, if only my mother was still alive. How good would that be? Although this sentence was perfunctory, but when she said it, Han Yunqi's heart still felt a little sad. Perhaps this was this body's instinctive reaction towards her mother. Or perhaps, since she was young, she had no one to rely on, so she longed for that maternal love. In her previous life, she didn't even know who her mother was. Now, although her mother was no longer around, she knew who she was and what kind of person she was. Occasionally, she could even hear legends about her. To her, this was already a very warm thing. Seeing Han Yunqi's sad look, a complicated look flashed past Long Fei's eyes, but he didn't pursue the matter. After finding the secret military missive on the female spy's body, he took Han Yunqi with him and left. By the time they returned to the Duke of Qin's residence, it was already afternoon. The first thing Long Fei did when he returned was to throw Han Yunqi a money pouch. Only then did Han Yunqi remember this. She didn't feel embarrassed as she openly took out a 300 taels banknote from Long Fei's money pouch and laughed. Thanks, it's clear now. Long Fei didn't reply as he turned around and left. Looking at his disappearing figure in the garden, Han Yunqi couldn't help but think, would this fellow stay over tonight? Or did he still have things to do? She subconsciously wrapped her clothes around herself, and only then did she realize that his cloak was still with her. She originally wanted to chase after him, but on second thought, she decided to wash it clean before returning it to him. Seeing Han Yunqi return wrapped in a man's cloak, little Chun Xiang trotted over. Master, whose cloak is this? Where did you go? This servant couldn't find you this early in the morning. I went for a ride. Han Yunqi pocketed the 300 taels banknote, her mood exceptionally bright. This cloak. Little Chun Xiang still wanted to ask. Han Yunqi put her finger on her lips and made a shoo sound. Little Chun Xiang didn't dare to bother her anymore. The next evening, Han Yunqi went to deliver the cloak. She knocked on the door for a long time, but no one opened it. She pushed the door and realized that the door wasn't locked. Did that fellow not have a habit of locking the door? Or was it too safe here? Han Yunqi walked in and realized that everything was still the same as before, clean and decent. However, that iceberg really wasn't there. Perhaps the Duke of Qin's residence was just a place for him to sleep. After leaving the cloak in the study, Han Yunqi didn't know why, but she couldn't help but sigh softly before shrugging her shoulders and leaving. Over the past few days, she hadn't been idle. She'd added a few medicine cabinets and bookshelves to the leisurely Cloud Pavilion study, as well as bought a few medical books to read to fill in the gaps in her detox system. Although she wasn't idle, her days were still comfortable. Still, she had no idea that Long Fei Yi, Grand Concubine Yi, or even the other mistresses of the imperial harem were all secretly investigating her. Her father, Han Kongan, had not only been summoned by the Empress Dowager, but Long Fei as well. Because of this, Han Kongan had to repeatedly search through Han Yunqi's rooms before she got married, hoping to find any clues. Master, it's all been investigated. It's confirmed that the one at Leisurely Cloud Pavilion is the real Han Yunqi. Before she got married, the Han family's servant girls and 2 young misses all saw her put on a red veil and put on a bridal sedan chair. From the Han estate to the Duke of Qin's estate, they passed through the city and through the streets, so it was impossible to do anything. That night, the wedding nanny was on guard as well. Chu Shifeng reported in detail. Did she treat the poison on her face in the bridal sedan chair? Long Fei Yi asked. There was a scar before she got on the sedan chair, but it was gone after she got off. Chu Shifeng paused before adding, Master, if esteemed Wang Fei could treat Princess Chongping's poison with a single bowl of medicine, I don't think it'd be difficult for her to do it. Since she has both talent and looks, why hide it and let others roll their eyes at her? Long Fei Yi asked again. Actually, he had no interest in Han Yunqi in the past. No matter what kind of person she was, whether she was beautiful or not, this woman had been forced on him by the Empress Dowager and Emperor. She'd never enter his eyes. He was even planning to chase her out of the Hibiscus courtyard on their wedding night and send her to a side palace in the suburbs to be put under house arrest forever. But Han Yunqi had saved him on their wedding night. Afterwards, she displayed medical skills and her way of handling matters, giving him surprise after surprise. Your Highness, it's better to be a fool than to be clever. As this subordinate sees it, if esteemed Wang Fei had revealed her talent and looks, she might not have been able to marry you, Chu Shifeng said with a smile. These words made it sound like Han Yunqi really wanted to marry Long Fei Yi. All of her forbearance was for the sake of marrying him. At least, that was what Long Fei Yi heard. Long Fei Yi looked over expressionlessly, but Chu Shifeng wasn't afraid of death. He actually said, Master, as this subordinate sees it, esteemed Wang Fei likes you. This subordinate. But before he could finish, Long Fei Yi's cold gaze darkened. Chu Shifeng shuddered and tactfully shut his mouth. The ignorant Han Yunqi was living very comfortably, but good days were always short-lived. Just when she thought that Grand Concubine Yi would be quiet for a while because of Princess Chongping, an unexpected problem came knocking on her door. It made it impossible for Grand Concubine Yi to have peace. Master, someone's come to ask for medical treatment again. They can't enter our estate, so they're waiting outside. I heard it's the 3rd Madam of Duke Shenghua, Little Chan Xiang reported, panting for breath. It wasn't clear who started the rumors, but news of Han Yunqi curing Mu Qingwu spread like wildfire. Moreover, the more they spread, the more ridiculous the rumors became. They said she was modest and low-key, not useless trash, but a once-in-a-century genius. Using all kinds of fictitious deeds, they made her sound as if she was the reincarnation of Hua Tu. Difficult and complicated diseases that the imperial physicians and various divine doctors could not treat were all easily solved by her. Just a bowl of medicine would be effective. Aside from that, There were even rumors that she was a benevolent divine doctor who didn't accept medical fees. Instead, she prioritized treating the poor first. As a result, since last night, many family members of patients had heard the news and rushed over. Whether they were high-ranking officials, imperial relatives, or ordinary citizens, they all ran over to seek medical treatment. The rumors had raised Han Yunxi so high and shaped her image so well. Now that a patient had come to seek medical treatment, she had to either clarify that she had no talent and become a laughingstock, or make a house call. If she refused, she'd be the subject of gossip. Everything had happened too suddenly. To create such a big headline in the capital circle of public opinion, it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Without a doubt, the person behind the scenes wanted to kill her by flattering her. Their intentions were too sinister to give her such a difficult problem. Chapter 49. Mistress, what do we do? Little Chun Xiang was anxious when an attendant came to report. Esteemed Wang Fei, Grand Imperial Concubine, wants you to come over immediately. Han Yunxi pursed her lips. When it rains, it pours. If she hoped that Grand Imperial Concubine could help her get through this crisis, then she was overthinking things. As soon as she entered, Grand Imperial Concubine showered her with curses. Han Yunxi, you don't feel comfortable if you don't show off your skills? Mu Fei has misunderstood. Yunxi wouldn't go to the extent of asking for trouble. Han Yunxi replied mildly. Asking for trouble? I think you're the one looking for trouble. You've already made a name for yourself. There's no one in or out of the palace who doesn't know of your skills, Han Yunxi. Do you know that I'm about to die from all the noise from those people? Grand Imperial Concubine raged. Many of those who came to seek treatment were of lowly status and couldn't even enter the Duke of Qin's gates. Grand Imperial Concubine had rejected all of the high-ranking officials and nobles for now. After all, the Duke of Qin's estate wasn't a clinic and Qin Wang Fei wasn't a doctor. If it was those nobles who were on good terms with Grand Imperial Concubine perhaps she'd let Han Yunxi take a look. But at this critical juncture, the rumors had spread throughout the city. Once there was a precedent, things would get out of hand. But if all of this hadn't happened at the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate, then it'd be a different story. Grand Imperial Concubine had long made plans in her heart. Mu Fei is an intelligent person. She should be able to tell that someone's spreading rumors to kill Yunxi. Han Yunxi replied seriously. Grand Imperial Concubine snorted disdainfully, a calculating look in her eyes. I don't care so much. Tell me how to deal with it right now. As she spoke, the guard ran to the gates to report again. Seeing this, Grand Imperial Concubine pretended to be angry and slapped the table. Han Yunxi, look for yourself. I'm telling you now, if you don't give me an explanation today, move out of the Duke of Qin's estate immediately. Move out of the Duke of Qin's estate? Han Yunxi immediately understood. Grand Imperial Concubine didn't find the people who came to seek treatment annoying at all. She clearly despised her as a troublesome daughter-in-law and wanted to take advantage of the situation to kick her out. Han Yunxi finally understood. No matter how much face she'd given Grand Concubine it was all in vain. Her fault lay not in the trouble she'd caused, but in her status. If it was Morong Wanru who ran into trouble today, Grand Concubine Yi's personality would definitely ferret out the culprit and strike back viciously. However, she was just an outsider's daughter-in-law, a daughter-in-law who was not to her liking. The two of them were destined to be enemies. Perhaps today's rumors were a trap set up by Grand Concubine and Morong Wanru. Since that was the case, there was no need for her to force herself to endure and greet him with a smile. Han Yunxi sneered. Mu Fei, are you trying to separate from the family? I can't make the decision on such an important matter. You should discuss it with His Highness. Wherever Long Fei Yi lived, she would live there. Husband and wife sang the same tune. She didn't even hesitate to kick down the bridal sedan chair door to marry into the Duke of Qin's mansion. How could she leave so easily? If she left, how many people would gossip about her behind her back? How long could she live peacefully? This marriage was bestowed by the Empress Dowager and decreed by the Emperor. Even Long Fei Yi couldn't chase her away without sufficient reasons, much less Grand Concubine Separate from the family? Hearing these words, Grand concubine Yi gave a start. On one side, Murong Wanru was gaping as well. She never thought Han Yunqi would dare to say such things. Grand concubine Yi treasured the Duke of Qin as much as her own life. As soon as the late emperor passed away, she used the excuse of being bored in the palace to move to the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqi, this outsider daughter-in-law, actually dared to say she wanted to separate from the family? Slap. With a loud crash, Grand concubine Yi lost all reason and slammed the table. Han Yunqi, what did you say just then? Explain it clearly to me. I said, if Mu Fei wants to separate from the family, then go talk to His Highness. Chen Xie can't make the decision. Chen Xie still has matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Han Yunqi said coldly before turning to leave. Rebellion. Rebellion. Someone come. Stop her for me. Grand concubine Yi raged. A few guards immediately stepped forward to stop her. Han Yunqi, you dare to talk to me about separating from the family? What right do you have to do that? Fei will never agree to it. You think too highly of yourself. Do you want a rebel? Grand concubine Yi raged. Mu Fei, I'm wrongly accused. Han Yunqi shouted. It's your idea to separate from the family, not mine. You can't wrong me like this. What? Grand concubine Yi's heart felt stifled as she almost fainted. You woman, how can you lie through your teeth? When did I say anything? Mu Fei wants me to move out. Could it be that you want me to move out by myself? Won't the Duke of Qin come with me? Han Yunqi asked seriously. Grand concubine Yi grew agitated at these words and didn't know how to retort. Han Yunqi looked like she'd suddenly realized something as she exclaimed, Mu Fei, you don't really want me to move out by myself, do you? Mu Fei, ever since I married into the family, I've never been lecherous, respectful, talkative, thieving, jealous, or ill. I'm also doing my best to give His Highness an heir. Why do you want to chase me away? Han Yunqi really hadn't committed any of the 7 crimes of divorcing a wife. Being childless, lecherous, talkative, thieving, jealous, and ill. Grand concubine Yi wanted to chase her away from the bottom of her heart. She was about to speak up when Murong Wanru rushed over to cut her off. Sister-in-law, it's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. You've really wronged Mu Fei. It wasn't a big deal to begin with, so why are you thinking so much? As she spoke, she shot a look at the fuming Grand concubine Yi and helped her sit down. Sister-in-law, Mu Fei's meaning is for you to stay in a courtyard in the suburbs for a few days. So many people have come to see you these past 2 days, so it's not good to take them all to the Duke of Qin's estate. It's also not good to refuse them all, is it? Murong Wanru offered Grand concubine Yi a cup of tea as she patted her chest. Mu Fei, don't be angry. How can sister-in-law set her heart at ease if you hurt your body? Sister-in-law has misunderstood your intentions. I'll talk to sister-in-law. She'll understand and agree for sure. Grand concubine Yi nodded. She'd weathered the winds and rains of the palace for so many years, so she wasn't the type to lose her cool. She'd already discussed this with Wanru to trick Han Yunqi into moving to another courtyard. Once she moved out, it'd be difficult to get her back. Still, Han Yunqi's mention of splitting up the family was enough to make her lose all reason. Fei was her only source of pride and support. He was her only hope for the rest of her life. No matter who it was, they shouldn't even think of kidnapping her son away. Han Yunqi looked at Murong Wanru with a cold smile in her heart. She had to praise this white lotus for being good with words. After pacifying Grand concubine Yi, Murong Wanru pulled Han Yunqi to sit down on one side. Han Yunqi sat down as well. She only wanted to scare Grand concubine Yi a little, but she didn't really want to have a falling out with her. Arguing with the old and young was the stupidest thing to do. Even if you were reasonable and the other party was purposely making things difficult for you, in the end, they'd label you as unfilial and impolite. It'd all be your fault. Murong Wanru was patient enough to give Han Yunqi a cup of tea as well. Sister-in-law, calm down, calm down. Mu Fei's meaning is for you to stay in another courtyard for a few days first. You can treat patients while thinking of a countermeasure. I won't let you stay here forever as a doctor. What do you mean by separating the family? No wonder Mu Fei's angry. Even if Big Brother heard it, he'd get mad at you too. In the end, it became Han Yunqi's fault. Murong by Lianhua was really something. At this rate, was she supposed to apologize to Grand Concubine Yi and accept their arrangements to stay in another courtyard? Murong Wanru had good methods, but Han Yunqi wasn't so easy to fool around with. She avoided the argument and got straight to the point. I saved the young general and princess because I just happen to know how to treat the poison in their bodies. I can't afford to wear the hat of a saintly and benevolent heart. I'll go clarify things right now. Han Yunqi rose to leave as she spoke. If someone cursed her as a good-for-nothing to her face, she'd definitely retort. But there was no need for her to let the world know she was a genius for no reason. Even the heavens were jealous of heroic talents, to say nothing of the masses. So be it. She didn't want to climb that high. Grand Concubine grew anxious again and raged. Stop right there. Aren't you just going to make a fool of yourself? Mu Fei, you couldn't have misunderstood as well, right? I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how to treat illnesses. I only dabble in detoxification, that's all. If you force me to treat someone and they die, wouldn't that be even more shameful? Han Yunqi said seriously. Both Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were left speechless. Murong Wanru's eyes flashed with sinister hatred. She was the one who'd spread the rumors. First, she could use this chance to chase Han Yunqi out of the Duke of Qin's estate. Second, she could tamper with Han Yunqi's patience and pin the crime of causing someone's death. It was a plot to kill two birds with one stone, but Han Yunqi had broken through it with a few words. Murong Wanru couldn't accept it. She put on a helpless expression and gave a long sigh. Sister-in-law, medicine and poison aren't separated. You're too modest. With the rumors spreading like wildfire, if you go clarify things, people might think you're aloof and virtuous. There are still some nobles out there. With Big Brother here, we don't have to worry about offending them. It's just that. Murong Wanru trailed off as she trailed off. It's just what? Grand Concubine Yi asked seriously. Murong Wanru glanced at Han Yunqi helplessly. It's just that sister-in-law still represents Big Brother. If you disappoint the people, I'm afraid it'll affect Big Brother's position in their hearts. That's the most important thing. Long Fei held a high position and power. Even the emperor had to yield to him, not only because of the power he held, but also because of the prestige he'd held in the hearts of Tianning citizens. Murong Wanru's words had hit the nail on the head. Still, Han Yunqi was amused. Even if Murong Wanru hadn't brought up Long Fei, she would have. It was best to push this kind of trouble onto Long Fei, she said. Wanru's words are very true. I don't dare to make a decision on my own, either. It's better to discuss things with His Highness before making a decision. Grand Concubine had already given up hope that she couldn't force Han Yunqi to move out. Now that she mentioned Long Fei, she grew cautious. She didn't want to go for wool and come home shorn, which would affect her son's reputation. Someone go to the Hibiscus courtyard and tell the Duke of Qin to hurry back. Just say I have urgent matters. Grand Concubine ordered. Seeing this, Murong Wanru took a deep breath. She knew she'd lost thoroughly. Chapter 50. Han Yunqi assumed that Long Fei wouldn't return so soon, but he didn't leave the house at all. He was still in the Hibiscus courtyard, and as soon as a servant went to report his arrival, Long Fei arrived. As soon as that tall and proud figure appeared in the doorway, both Murong Wanru and the other servant girls flushed red. They were both nervous and excited, their hearts pounding wildly. They wanted to steal a glance at him, but didn't dare. He was dressed in loose white robes, his ink-black hair tied up with an ink-black jade hairpin. He looked like an emotionless immortal from the 9 heavens, handsome and extraordinary, aloof and otherworldly. Even Grand Concubine, he couldn't take her eyes off him. Having a son like this was the happiest thing in her life. But Han Yunqi only silently rolled her eyes. This fellow's attire made it obvious that he lived at home. Even as the true head of the house, he was still able to keep his composure despite such a big incident. She couldn't help but admire him. Grand Concubine happily pulled Long Fei to sit on the couch and told him the story with embellishments. She made it sound like Han Yunqi was the one who'd provoked them. Han Yunqi looked down and thought to herself, Long Fei, if you don't take care of this, I won't make house calls next time even if it's 3,000 taels. But she'd hardly thought this when Long Fei tossed her a cold question. Han Yunqi, how do you think we should handle this? Chen Xie is slow-witted. May your highness make the decision. Han Yunqi was very humble. If you're slow-witted, then think it over carefully, Long Fei said next. Han Yunqi steeled her heart and said, as Chen Xie sees it, a clarification is necessary. The key is how and who will do it. Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru didn't take her words to heart, but Long Fei nodded and indicated for her to continue. Seeing this, both mother and daughter looked over in disbelief. Han Yunqi said seriously, in this concubine's humble opinion, it would be most convincing if Imperial Concubine Mother came forward to clarify the matter. After all, Imperial Concubine Mother was the one who rejected them previously. Moreover, there was no lack of nobles who came to seek medical treatment. Even if his mother were to appear, they would not dare to have any objections. As for the commoners, this concubine suggests that Imperial Concubine Mother give each of them a sum of money to treat their illness so that they can find another famous doctor. Firstly, it will show Imperial Concubine Mother's benevolence, and secondly, it will not give people a reason to gossip. She actually wanted Grand Concubine Yi to solve the problem herself? Murong Wanru covered her mouth in disbelief. She thought, Han Yunqi, you're indulging in the wildest fantasies. Just wait to be humiliated. I'm showing myself? Grand Concubine Yi was a little unhappy. Han Yunqi added, Mu Fei, you're the most suitable person to represent His Highness. As she spoke, she looked at Long Fei Yi. Your Highness, don't you agree? This guy was supposed to be her backer, but Han Yunqi was forcing him to open his mouth. Long Fei Ye's eyes flashed with unnoticed admiration before he nodded openly. Although Grand Concubine Yi doted on her son, he had never been close to her. Now that he was older, they were even less close. Especially in the past few years, it was rare for them to have a proper conversation and eat a meal together. Seeing her son nod, Grand Concubine Yi felt as sweet as honey in her heart. She didn't bother arguing with Han Yunqi anymore. All right, someone come, prepare the silver. I'll go take care of things right now. Grand Concubine Yi was about to leave when she turned back. Fei, just eat dinner at my place. It's been a long time since you ate with Mu Fei. She didn't wait for Long Fei Yi to reply, but quickly ordered Murong Wanru to take care of things. Murong Wanru wanted to stay a bit longer, but had no choice but to leave unwillingly. After everyone left, only Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi were left in the guest hall. Han Yunqi silently exhaled in relief. This calamity had finally passed. The person who spread the rumors better not let her find out, or else don't blame her poison doctor for turning into a poison hand. She stole a glance at Long Fei Yi. Whether it was using this guy's name to intimidate others, or inviting him out in person, it was all very useful. While Han Yunqi was laughing up her sleeve, Long Fei Yi said mildly, You've improved, What? Han Yunqi didn't hear him clearly. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi wasn't planning to say it a second time. He stood up and walked towards the door, his back cold and lonely. Han Yunqi felt like he was right in front of her eyes, but also far away on the horizon. She chased after him and stood by the door, shouting, Hey, I sent that cloak to your study. Did you see it? Han Yunqi assumed that this guy would ignore her, but he actually turned around and nodded his head. Han Yunqi gave a start before saying, Oh. She didn't know why, but she suddenly broke into a silly smile. A moment later, Long Fei Yi was long gone before Han Yunqi realized that something was off. Didn't Grand Concubine Yi want him to stay for dinner? He actually left without a word? Han Yunqi coughed lightly a few times. Seeing that no one was around, she hastily slipped out the door. Grand Concubine Yi hadn't asked her to stay, so what was she waiting for now that Long Fei Yi was gone? Letting Grand Concubine Yi stand her up was purely Long Fei Yi's business. By the time Han Yunqi slipped back to the hibiscus courtyard, the lights in Long Fei Yi's quarters were already on. That meant he was inside. Would this guy be spending the night in his quarters tonight? How many days had he been back? Where did he spend his nights outside? How did he do it? Han Yunqi thought of a bunch of questions before realizing that she was bored. Why was she so curious about these things? He had his territory. She had her leisurely cloud pavilion. Well water didn't interfere with river water. She shrugged her shoulders and turned to head for the leisurely cloud pavilion. Chun Xiang had already prepared a fragrant meal for her. As soon as she reached the door, Han Yunxi could smell the blissful scent of food. But she'd hardly stepped through the doors when an attendant reported from behind her. "Esteemed Wang Fei, Grand Concubine Yi wants you to come over immediately." Han Yunxi exhaled and asked coldly, "What's the matter?" This subordinate isn't clear. Grand Concubine Yi has also summoned His Highness. "I don't think it's a small matter," the attendant replied honestly. Han Yunxi didn't think much of it. What could Grand Concubine Yi possibly want? She didn't even need to mention the trouble at the door. Grand Concubine Yi had the intelligence and wisdom to deal with it herself. Even Long Fei Yi had been summoned. It looked like it had to be a matter of letting Grand Concubine Yi stand her up. Right away," Han Yunxi said mildly. As soon as the attendant left, she continued through the doors. She wanted to eat a few mouthfuls to fill her stomach before going over. She'd definitely go hungry at a family banquet. Han Yunxi had arrived late, but things had gone completely beyond her expectations. Long Fei Yi had arrived long ago, but there was an extra person in Grand Concubine Yi's guest hall. Tianing Country's Emperor Tianhui's personal eunuch, Eunuch Xue. Everyone looked towards Han Yunxi as soon as they entered, making the already restless Han Yunxi even more nervous. The eunuch by the emperor's side came to visit. No matter what it was related to the emperor. Seeing Grand Concubine Yi and Long Fei Yi's expressions, Han Yunxi's heart grew uneasy. Nothing good could come of this. This servant, Xue Guiping, pays respects to esteemed Wang Fei. Eunuch Xue's face was all smiles as he spoke in a strange tone. Eunuch Xue must take offense. "You may rise," Han Yunxi said politely. Eunuch Xue wasn't any ordinary servant. "Eunuch Xue, have a seat," Grand Concubine Yi said. Since Grand Concubine Yi had spoken, Eunuch Xue didn't stand on ceremony and sat down on one side. Seeing this, Han Yunxi found a seat by Long Fei Yi's side and sat down as well. "Yunxi, explain to Eunuch Xue yourself. You don't have any medical skills, only detoxification. Otherwise, Eunuch Xue won't be able to report back," Grand Concubine Yi said calmly. At these words, Han Yunxi's heart almost stopped. Could it be that the emperor heard the rumors and wanted to find her to treat his illness as well? Though her heart was flustered, Han Yunxi remained calm on the surface. "Eunuch Xue, what's going on?" To reply, esteemed Wang Fei, "The emperor heard that your medical skills are exceptional and can treat illnesses that imperial physician Gu and divine Dr. Han couldn't. That's why he had this old servant invite you into the palace to take His Highness Crown Prince's pulse," Eunuch Xue said politely. Han Yunxi's mouth twitched. Take his pulse. These 3 words were said so lightly. The Crown Prince was the Empress and Empress Dowager's treasure. He was the heir apparent that the Emperor had raised with his own hands. But 7 years ago he'd contracted a strange illness. Han Kongan had volunteered to treat him, but after 7 years of treatment, he still hadn't been able to diagnose the cause. Han Kongan had spent a great deal of effort and owed many favors, seeking out many directors of the medical academy for consultation, but none of them had been able to cure him. There were plenty of incurable illnesses in the world, but Han Kongan had taken the Crown Prince's pulse as one of pregnancy. How could a grown man have a pulse of pregnancy? Everyone thought it was a misdiagnosis, but the directors of the medical academy all agreed that it was a pulse of pregnancy. This made the Empress Dowager furious. Because of this, she bore a grudge against the Han family. She even ignored Lady Tianxin's life-saving grace and wanted to kill Han Kongan multiple times. Naturally, this matter was kept a secret. Only the Emperor, Empress Dowager, Empress, the Duke of Qin, Han Kongan, Imperial Physician Gu, and a few directors of the medical academy knew. Everyone else only knew that the Crown Prince had contracted a strange illness. As for what it was, that was nothing but rumors. The directors of the medical academy left, but Han Kongan suffered a tragedy. In fact, the medical academy's directors had already consulted, but there were no results. The Empress Dowager and Emperor knew that even if they invited others, there wouldn't be any results. Thus, they let Han Kongan continue the treatment to prevent the matter from leaking out. From then on, all the anger was placed on Han Kongan alone. Han Yunqi knew this from the original owner's memory. The original owner had accidentally overheard it. Now, the emperor actually wanted her to take the pulse? Could it be that he wanted her daughter to take over her father's business and replace Han Kongan? Eunuch Shui, it's a big misunderstanding. Han Yunqi suddenly stood up with an anxious face. Eunuch Shui, although the Han family is a medical family, I was born slow-witted and don't have any medical skills. This is something that everyone knows. Your Majesty, did you hear the rumors outside and misunderstand me? Eunuch Shui smiled. Wang Fei Nyang is really modest. As the saying goes, there's no smoke without fire. Wang Fei Nyang must have the ability for the people outside to spread such rumors. It's a misunderstanding. My Mu Fei just went out to clarify it. Han Yunqi wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Who knew that Eunuch Shui would say, Wang Fei Nyang, even if the rumors outside are a misunderstanding, can the truth be trusted? The emperor has heard about the young general's matter and Princess Chongping's matter. Imperial physician Gu and divine Dr. Han both examined the young general and Princess Chongping's illness, but they couldn't see the cause. You cured the illness in half a day. When the emperor heard this, his imperial countenance was filled with joy and praised you for surpassing your master. You're just like your mother, Lady Tianqin, in the past. Eunuch Shui was overjoyed as he spoke, but Han Yunqi's heart was broken. Wang Fei Nyang, this time it was the empress who personally recommended you. Wang Fei Nyang really hid her strength well. If you continue to be modest, be careful of the imperial countenance becoming angry. Eunuch Shui said half-jokingly. The empress? What was called flattery to death? This was true flattery to death. What did the rumors outside count for? Han Yunqi sat back down, finally understanding. She inadvertently glanced at Grand Concubine Yi's face and saw the mocking smile on her lips. She seemed to be waiting to see a good show. By her side, Murong Wanru looked sympathetic, but her eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Chapter 51. Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were both eager for Han Yunqi to disappoint the emperor and be severely punished. It'd be best if she was crippled, so she never came back. Murong Wanru, in particular, was the one who'd spread the rumors this time. Her original plan was to chase Han Yunqi out of the Duke of Qin's estate, but it ended up alarming the emperor instead. It was best if the emperor came to deal with this woman. The emperor had forced Long Feiyi to marry her, so he personally crippled her. What could be more satisfying than that? Han Yunqi couldn't help but glance towards Long Feiyi, only to see him as lofty and aloof as ever. His expression was cold and distant, making him seem frighteningly unfamiliar. In his heart, he was probably rejoicing in her misfortune as well. He'd love to get rid of her official consort title as well. Esteemed Wang Fei, it's too late today. His Majesty had this servant come to say hello and have you rest well. Tomorrow morning, this servant will come to pick you up. Eunuch Shui stood up as he spoke. Grand Concubine Yi hastened to follow suit. Eunuch Shui, it's rare for you to come back. Have a meal before you leave. Many thanks for esteemed Wang Fei's good intentions, but this old servant still has to return to report. Esteemed Wang Fei, Your Highness Duke of Qin, farewell. Eunuch Shui didn't forget to remind Han Yunqi, esteemed Wang Fei, don't delay tomorrow morning. His Majesty wants to see you after morning court. I'll remember. Take care, Eunuch Shui. Han Yunqi was natural and unrestrained, a smile on her face. But her heart was cold. A man with a pregnancy pulse? Leaving aside the ancient times, this was a strange story even in modern times. She might even be able to treat serious illnesses, to say nothing of a strange ailment. Han Yunqi could ignore the rumors outside, but she couldn't ignore the emperor's expectations. Judging from Eunuch Shui's words, Emperor Tianhui had high hopes for her medical skills. If she refused, she'd be giving him no face. But if she didn't refuse and couldn't treat him, then the emperor's mood would dictate the outcome. Supposedly, Emperor Tianhui had a bad temper. The empress had even added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. If she couldn't treat him, then the consequences would be obvious. After sending imperial physician Shui away, Grand Concubine acted as if nothing had happened as she urged, Wanru, hurry and call for the meal. Your big brother must be hungry. She was in a good mood as she glanced at Han Yunxi. It was rare for her to be so good-natured. Yunxi, you should eat at Mufei's place too. Once you're full, go back and sleep. You mustn't wake up late tomorrow morning. Although Han Yunxi's heart had turned cold, she still smiled and nodded. Grand concubine Yi and Murong Wanru wanted to laugh at her, right? She wouldn't let them. At the table, Grand concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were both attentive. They kept giving Long Fei Yi food and soup, but Long Fei Yi didn't eat much. He didn't say a word from beginning to end. Han Yunxi, who was completely ignored, lowered her eyes and focused on eating and drinking soup. Forget it. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, I can't avoid it. I'll just play it by ear tomorrow. Han Yunxi ate and drank well. She thought she'd be able to sleep well, too, but she tossed and turned all night. She simply got up and wrapped herself in a blanket to lean against the window and stare blankly. But by chance, she discovered that the lights in Long Fei Ye's quarters were still on. It's so late, but that guy's still awake? Why can't he sleep? She didn't know why, but his words suddenly popped up in her head. With your lordship here, I won't allow you to be afraid. In a flash, Han Yunxi had an impulse to run over and ask him if he could accompany her one more time like last time when she went to the palace to pay her respects. But when she recalled his icy silence, her bright eyes dimmed. Forget it. Taking a deep breath, Han Yunxi shut the window and told herself that it's no big deal. Don't be afraid. Even though she didn't sleep all night, Han Yunxi still got up very early the next morning. She had little Chun Xiang dress her up meticulously, making her look especially spirited. Since it was something she couldn't avoid, then she'd face it head-on. Han Yunxi told herself that she had to not only do it bravely, but work hard to do it well. Eunuch Shui came to welcome her, as did Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru. On one hand, they were giving Eunuch Shui face. On the other hand, they were here to see her make a fool of herself. Seeing them smile at her, Han Yunxi looked even prettier. She was the type of person who wouldn't shed a tear even if she saw a coffin, so how could they laugh at her? Before boarding the carriage, Han Yunxi glanced back, but didn't see any sign of Long Fei Yi. By the time she left the hibiscus courtyard, the lights in his quarters had long been extinguished and the doors shut. He was still asleep, so he wouldn't come. By the time they reached the palace, Emperor Tianhui had already left court and was waiting in the imperial study. The long corridor leading to the study was more serene than any other place in the palace. Before long, one could see court ladies and eunuchs standing on either side of the corridor, unmoving like statues. Amidst the silence, Han Yunxi and Eunuch Shui's footsteps were especially obvious. Esteemed Wang Fei, walk faster. His Majesty hates waiting for people, Eunuch Shui urged in a low voice. Even in the corridor, he spoke very carefully. Such a solemn atmosphere made the already apprehensive Han Yunxi even more nervous. From what she understood, Emperor Tianhui could be considered half a tyrant with a violent temper. When he killed someone, he didn't even crease an eyebrow. Soon enough, they arrived at the imperial study. Eunuch Shui stopped outside the door and murmured, "Esteemed Wang Fei, you can go in by yourself." Even Eunuch Shui didn't have the right to know about the crown prince's affairs, so he was very self-aware. Before Han Yunxi could react, he raised his voice and shouted, reporting, "Qin Wang Fei has arrived." At these words, Han Yunxi had no choice but to hurry inside. This was her first time here, so she only felt that the atmosphere was frighteningly solemn. She didn't know any etiquette, nor did she know where to go, so she simply walked straight ahead. But this place was damned silent, many times quieter than outside. It made her feel like her footsteps were guilty. Finally, Han Yunxi saw a large curtain of beads in front of her. She could faintly make out a person standing by a desk inside. Was Emperor Tianhui there? Han Yunxi's heart skipped a beat. She clenched her fists before walking in with her head bowed. She carefully lifted a corner of the bead curtain, only to be met with a gaze as sharp as an eagle's. Instantly, Han Yunxi felt murderous intent rising from all sides. "You're Qin Wang Fei, Han Yunxi?" Emperor Tianhui's voice was cold. He was in his 40s and had a goatee. His face was as cold as the king of hell, imposing without being angry. Unlike Long Fei Ye's coldness, which was cold and detached, Long Fei's coldness was aloof, emotionless, and lofty. Emperor Tianhui's coldness was stern and fiendish. Han Yunqi might have been nervous, but she was still able to keep her composure. She gracefully bowed in greeting. To reply, Your Majesty, Chen Xie is Qin Wang Fei, Han Yunqi. But Emperor Tianhui suddenly said sternly, Who allowed you to come in so casually? Who allowed you to come in? At these words, Han Yunqi froze in place. She was a transmigrator who only knew basic etiquette. How could she know the many rules of the imperial study? Moreover, hadn't eunuch Xue just announced her arrival and told her to come in? Han Yunqi bowed, unable to figure out where she'd gone wrong. For a moment, she didn't know whether to answer or stay silent. Although she was designated as Qin Wang Fei, in the emperor's eyes, Han Yunqi was nothing more than a lowly commoner. Just as Han Yunqi was feeling awkward, a familiar voice spoke up from the side. Imperial brother, she's an uneducated woman to begin with. There's no need to bicker with her. Proper business is more important. The deep voice carried its own magnetism, cold enough to make one shiver. Although it was full of ridicule, Han Yunqi felt an inexplicable warmth in her ears. It's him, Long Fei. She unconsciously raised her head and looked towards the source of the voice, only to see Long Fei dressed in brocade palace robes. He was handsome and noble as he sat at a tea table on the side, slowly sipping from a steaming cup of hot tea. This guy actually came, and even arrived before her. Seeing him sitting there so calm and composed, Han Yunqi felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She inexplicably exhaled in relief. Did he come because of her? A wild hope rose in Han Yunqi's heart that even she hadn't thought of. Without a doubt, Long Fei's words carried weight. Emperor Tianhui looked over without a word, but waved a hand to indicate that Han Yunqi should rise. It was a long time later that Han Yunqi found out that even the empress had to bow outside the beaded curtains when she came to the imperial study. She could only enter the inner chambers with the emperor's permission. Thank you, Your Majesty. Han Yunqi rose to her feet, sneaking a grateful glance towards Long Fei. Unfortunately, Long Fei didn't look at her. Although she was his younger sister-in-law, there was still a difference between monarch and subject. Moreover, she couldn't enter the emperor's eyes at all. Long Fei could sit, but Han Yunqi could only stand. Jin heard the empress say that Mu Qingwu was in a coma and Chongping had moss. All the doctors were helpless, but you cured them with a single prescription? Emperor Tianhui got straight to the point, looking disdainfully at Han Yunqi from above. He didn't see her as his younger sister-in-law at all. To reply, Your Majesty, there really is such a thing. But strictly speaking, the young general and Princess Chongping weren't sick, but poisoned. Chen Xie knows how to treat poisons, not treat illnesses. No matter what, Han Yunqi had to tell the truth. She could try to see the crown prince, but she had to be honest before that. But the emperor only said, medicine and poison are one family. Jin heard your mother say in the past that all illnesses are caused by poisons. Do you understand this logic? Cough, cough. Han Yunqi almost choked on her own saliva. She wasn't sure if Lady Tianqin had said those words, but she had to admit that they were too far-fetched. If one looked at it from the perspective of Western medicine, all the lesions were really caused by the virus. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for her. Poisons and viruses were two different concepts. She could mostly treat poisons that existed naturally in plants and animals, as well as man-made poisons. Leaving that aside, Emperor Tianhui's words put Han Yunqi in a difficult position. She couldn't deny her mother's words, but she couldn't explain it enough for Emperor Tianhui to understand the subtleties. Han Yunqi thought it over before replying modestly, medicine and poisons are one family. That's the highest realm for both doctors and poisons. Yunqi has only learned the superficial knowledge of mother's skills. Hee. No wonder the empress said you were modest. Even your father and Gu Beiwei couldn't treat illnesses, yet you treated them as easily as turning over your hand. If this counts as superficial knowledge, then wouldn't your father and Gu Beiwei be good-for-nothings? Emperor Tianhui asked sternly. To reply, Your Majesty, Divine Dr. Han Yunqi and Imperial Physician Gu know how to treat illnesses, while Yunqi knows how to treat poisons. These are two different matters that can't be compared, Han Yunqi explained as before. Who knew that the emperor was impatient and unhappily said, Qin Wang Fei, Jin summoned you here to treat an illness, not to be modest. Jin still hopes that you can cure the crown prince with a bowl of medicine. Are you going to keep hiding your skills? Han Yunqi's heart thumped at these words. Heaven knows how the Empress had whispered pillow talk to make the Emperor believe so strongly in her medical skills. Chapter 52. Faced with Emperor Tianhui's impatience, Han Yunqi knew that any further explanation would only turn into an argument. Did she not want her head anymore? She couldn't help but steal a glance at Long Fei Yi. This guy knew she only knew how to treat poisons, so he should at least speak up for her. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi was still leisurely brewing tea and didn't pay any attention to her side. Han Yunqi's lips curved up in self-mockery. She was overthinking things. How could this guy help her? He probably had nothing better to do, so he came to watch. If she couldn't explain herself, then she wouldn't. Han Yunqi wanted to do her best to treat him. Even if she couldn't, the Emperor couldn't kill her, right? Your Majesty, since you've summoned Yunqi to treat his illness, then let Yunqi take a look at His Highness Crown Prince's pulse first, she said seriously. Emperor Tianhui had been waiting for her to say exactly that. Han Yunqi, don't disappoint Jun. Han Yunqi did her best to bear the pressure, and soon arrived at the Eastern Palace with the Emperor and Duke of Qin. As soon as they reached the gates, they saw that the place was heavily guarded. Many people knew that the Crown Prince had contracted a strange illness, but the exact nature of the illness was a huge secret. Han Yunqi only knew that it was a pregnancy pulse. She had no idea what the Crown Prince's current condition was or whether he'd changed over the years. She only knew that the Crown Prince hadn't left the Eastern Palace since his illness began 7 years ago. The Crown Prince had been intelligent since childhood and was the Empress's eldest son. He had a noble status and was doted on by the Emperor. Since he was 3 years old, Emperor Tianhui had spent a lot of effort to cultivate him. But in the end, he'd contracted a strange illness. If it couldn't be cured, Emperor Tianhui would have no choice but to reconsider the heir apparent. Once that happened, not only would it take time and effort, but it would also incite internal strife within the court. The princes would even kill each other. Tianning country was still developing, so internal strife was the last thing Emperor Tianhui wanted to see. Thus, he hadn't given up on the Crown Prince even after 7 years of illness. Even when the Crown Prince was confined to bed, he still paid attention to court affairs daily and knew everything like the back of his hand. Walking into the Eastern Palace, Han Yunqi's heart sank when she saw that the security was even tighter than the one outside. She couldn't help but consider a problem. The Crown Prince wasn't suffering from any other strange illness, but a pregnancy pulse that he was ashamed to speak of. In a way, this was a disgrace to Tianning's imperial clan. It could even be seen as a sign of disaster. Once the Emperor finally gave up on the Crown Prince, would anyone who knew about the Crown Prince's strange illness still be alive? Han Kongan, Gu Beiwei, and her, who was about to meet the Crown Prince. Although she was Qin Wang Fei, the Emperor's attitude just now clearly showed that he didn't treat her as a member of the imperial family. The entire journey was silent. When they arrived at the bedchamber, they saw that the Empress Dowager and the Empress had already arrived. However, Han Kongan and Gu Beiwei did not come. Han Yunqi originally thought that they would also come. It looked like Emperor Tianhui had long decided to let her pick the Great Liang. Through the beaded curtain, she could vaguely see that the bed in the inner room was covered by a gauze curtain. The Crown Prince should be lying on the bed. At this distance, the detox system would warn her if there was any poison. Han Yunqi didn't hear the warning, but she still held onto a sliver of hope. She'd do a full body scan when she got closer to be certain. As soon as she saw Han Yunqi enter, the Empress Dowager was very affectionate. She took her hand tightly, her face full of emotion, as if she hadn't been the one to issue the arrest warrant for Hizhe of the North Court. Yunqi, you've really surprised me. I thought that after your mother left, my lucky star had left as well. I never thought that you'd inherit your mother's medical skills. Good, very good. Even the Emperor had no effect explaining things, much less this mastermind behind the scenes. Moreover, Han Yunqi didn't believe that they were sincere in wanting her to save the Crown Prince. They just wanted to toss this hot potato from Han Kongan's hands to her. Then they'd have another excuse to punish her for her crimes. Han Yunqi was too lazy to explain, so she only smiled. I'm not clear on the specifics either. I'll do my best. At this moment, the Empress came forward as well, taking Han Yunqi's other hand as if she was very familiar with her. Yunqi, don't be modest. I won't allow you to fail to cure him. If even you can't cure him, then, as the Empress spoke, she took out a handkerchief to cover her face and began to sob. Seeing this, the Emperor's eyes flashed with impatience. All right. Qin Wangfei, come inside with Zhan.
Yes.
Han Yunqi nodded. Seeing that the Empress Dowager and Empress had no plans to enter, she assumed that the Long Fei Yi wouldn't enter either. But who knew that this silent fellow actually walked in front of her? He didn't say a single word on her behalf. At this moment, Han Yunqi found this fellow to be a bit of an eyesore. Han Yunqi took a deep breath and strode into the inner rooms. Inside, she could faintly make out the person on the bed. That person was covered with blankets as he lay on his back. His features couldn't be seen clearly, but Han Yunqi knew he was awake. This was Tianing Country's crown prince, Long Tianma. Han Yunqi was staring when Long Tianma said, Tianma is unable to get off the bed to pay respects. Imperial father, please forgive me. Imperial Qin uncle, please forgive me. Han Yunqi's heart gave a slight start. She thought that Long Tianma would give up on himself and have a bad temper. She didn't expect him to have such courtesy. Although his voice sounded weak, it didn't have the dispirited air of someone who'd been ill for a long time. 7 years. 7 whole years. After suffering from such a shameful illness, it was excusable if he didn't speak or chased people out. Just how strong was this man's mental fortitude? No wonder Emperor Tianhui thought so highly of him and still hadn't given up on him. As a doctor, the sensitive Han Yunqi immediately smelled his strong will to live. Leaving aside everything else, Han Yunqi admired patients like this. But this fellow had completely ignored her. For better or for worse, she was still his imperial aunt. All right, Han Yunqi admitted that she couldn't admire him. Separated by the gauze curtains, Han Yunqi sat down by the bed and said mildly, Your hand? After a while, Long Tianma extended his hand without a word. It was obvious that he was unhappy and didn't trust Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi really wanted to tell him that she was even more unhappy than he was, but Han Yunqi abandoned all distracting thoughts after putting her hand on his. She became serious. Following that, Emperor Tianhui and Long Tianma fell silent as well, feeling a little nervous. Only Long Fei Yi sat on one side, studying Han Yunqi's small face. It was unclear what he was looking at. Han Yunqi didn't take his pulse immediately, but activated her scanning system to do a deeper examination. Unfortunately, the results disappointed her. She still couldn't find any poison. Gathering her thoughts, she began to take his pulse seriously. Although she was a doctor of poisons, she still knew how to diagnose patients. She just wasn't proficient in it. Taking one's pulse was both the simplest and the most difficult. As soon as she touched Long Tianma's pulse, she had a rough idea of what was going on, but didn't dare to be careless. At first glance, it really did look like a pregnancy pulse. Strictly speaking, a pregnancy pulse wasn't a type of pulse. It was a special case of a slippery pulse that only applied to women. In traditional Chinese medicine, a pregnant woman's pulse was called a pregnancy pulse. If the woman didn't have her period, had no symptoms, and had a slippery pulse, then it was time to consider whether she was pregnant or not. A slippery pulse meant that the pulse was smooth, floating, solid, and smooth. If there was anemia, rheumatism, acute infection, fever, acute or chronic gastroenteritis, cirrhosis, ascites, and other symptoms, a slippery pulse would also appear. Han Yunqi felt a slippery pulse. Judging from the pulse, Long Tianma's body didn't have any symptoms. For a moment, Han Yunqi was at a loss. What kind of pulse should this be? Han Kongan and the Medical Academy's highly respected directors had all classified this as a pregnancy pulse, but what about her? The ancients didn't understand basic common sense, but she did. How could a man give birth to a child without a vagina or a uterus? Although there were plenty of medical theories in modern times that suggested the miracle of a man giving birth through surgery, those were all theories. Moreover, it still required surgery. What was Long Tianma's pulse? It could only be described as a slippery pulse without any symptoms. Thinking up to here, Han Yunshi released Long Tianma's hand. Seeing this, Emperor Tianhui hastily asked, "How is it? Your Majesty, can you invite Imperial Physician Gu over?" Han Yunshi asked seriously. She'd have to consult Gu Beiwei about this pulse. Hearing Han Yunshi's words, Emperor Tianhui's expression turned ghastly. Gu Beiwei's already taken a look? He can't help it. Just what did you see? Han Yunshi wasn't afraid, but told him the truth. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's pulse is slippery. For the time being, Yunshi can't confirm the specifics. We need to do a further examination. I need Imperial Physician Gu's help. Isn't it a pregnancy pulse? The Emperor was stunned. Long Fei looked over as well, astonished. At this moment, the Empress Dowager and Empress rushed in at the same time. Isn't it a pregnancy pulse? Is it really not? Yunshi, what is it then? Hurry and tell us. Yunshi, I knew you wouldn't disappoint His Majesty. Hurry and tell us what's going on. The Empress Dowager and Empress were both moved. For a second, Han Yunshi almost believed that they were sincere. But it was at this moment that Long Tianma suddenly lifted the covers and pointed at his stomach, mocking, "Qin Wang Fei, you said it's not a pregnancy pulse. Then what is it?" Even through the muslin curtains, Han Yunshi could see it clearly. Heavens! Long Tianma's stomach was very, very big. It looked like he'd been pregnant for 7 months. Han Yunshi seemed to think of something as her face turned ghastly white. She knew now, things were troublesome. Very troublesome. She can't even read the pulse. Imperial Father, Akin refuses to let her treat me. Long Tianma's tone was extremely cold. He was already sick of Han Kongan, so how could he still trust his trash of a daughter? Even if Han Yunshi was Qin Wang Fei, even if Imperial Uncle Qin, who he feared the most, was present, he wouldn't be polite. He knew that Imperial Uncle Qin would never take a fancy to this woman. Did you read the wrong pulse? The Empress Dowager was extremely disappointed. I thought there'd be a miracle. Yunshi, so you didn't even see Tianma's stomach. I thought say, you can't even read the pulse. How are you going to save him? The Empress sighed. Long Tianma covered himself with the covers again and simply turned his back to them. Seeing this, Emperor Tianhui's eyebrows furrowed. He glared at Han Yunshi and said coldly, "Fishing for fame. Deceiving the world to gain fame. You, and your father, you too. Someone come, take them out and give them 30 floggings." The Empress Dowager and Empress exchanged glances and tacitly smiled coldly. Long Fei remained seated the entire time, coldly staring at Han Yunshi. It was as if this woman wasn't his Wang Fei and had nothing to do with him. The Empress Dowager and Empress were waiting for Han Yunshi to beg for mercy. They were waiting to hit her while she was down and pin the crime of deceiving the monarch on her. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi's eyes flashed with anger. She actually glared angrily at Emperor Tianhui without backing down. She clenched her fists, her petite frame seeming to contain a hidden strength that could explode at any moment. This woman, what does she want to do? Does she know what she's doing right now? Emperor Tianhui widened his eyes in disbelief. This was the first time someone had dared to glare at him like this. Chapter 53. Han Yunshi was infuriated. She understood that the Tao didn't pass on the scriptures, while doctors didn't knock on the door. It was clearly Emperor Tianhui who summoned her to treat him, so why did it sound like she'd come to cheat him? Since when had she been angling for fame? Since when had she gained fame by deceiving the world? Weren't the rumors spread by people with ulterior motives? The 2 eunuchs on the side who were about to step forward were frightened by the sight and didn't dare to move. Seeing this, the Empress Dowager and Empress exchanged looks of disbelief. Wasn't this girl too bold? She dared to be so impudent in front of the Emperor? Still, Long Fei's lips drew up into a beautiful curve. In the silence, Han Yunshi spoke up coldly, word for word. Your Majesty, I don't care who diagnosed the pregnancy pulse. I'll say it again. The Crown Prince's pulse is slippery, not pregnant. If you called me here just to verify someone else's diagnosis, then you found the wrong person. Emperor Tianhui was left speechless by her words. A pregnancy pulse was something that had been determined long ago. He'd invited Han Yunshi here so she could treat this illness. That was because Han Kongan had prescribed abortion pills after the crown prince's stomach grew bigger. Unfortunately, none of them had any effect. Han Kongan didn't know where to start, so he could only take the crown prince's pulse every day and have him drink medicine to nourish his body. Emperor Tianhui couldn't help but worry that the crown prince would really give birth to a child one day. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi's diagnosis wasn't a pregnancy pulse. Seeing that Emperor Tianhui was still angry, Han Yunshi continued, "Your Majesty, it's impossible for a man to get pregnant. Yunshi dares to guarantee with my life that His Highness Crown Prince doesn't have a pregnancy pulse. The focus of the illness can only be in His Highness's stomach, which should be a giant sarcoma. That's why it looks like a fetus and has such a slippery pulse. If we don't treat it now, it'll endanger the Crown Prince's life if the sarcoma continues to grow." Everyone present was stunned by her words. This woman could still say so much with such self-assurance? Han Kongan had treated her for 7 years and was completely sure that it was a pregnancy pulse and that there was a fetus in her belly. Han Yunshi, oh Han Yunshi, how could she say that it was just a lesion in her belly? Long Tianma turned around abruptly. He had to admit that even though he didn't have any hope for Han Yunshi, his eyes couldn't help but light up with hope when he heard the diagnosis. If it wasn't a pregnancy pulse, but a strange disease, a sarcoma like Han Yunshi said, then his whole life could be turned around. One had to know that if it was confirmed to be a pregnancy pulse, even if it was cured, it would be a big stain in his life. Once it was exposed, he would be ridiculed by the world. If it was a malignant tumor, then it would be perfectly normal. He would not spend so much effort to guard against the spying and investigation of the other princes. Looking at the stubborn Han Yunshi, Long Tianma suddenly had an impulse to believe her. Meanwhile, the Empress had a complicated expression on her face. Of course she wanted her son to be fine. He was her everything. But she still couldn't completely trust Han Yunshi, much less hope that Han Yunshi would succeed in this matter. "Yunshi, but your father has been taking the crown prince's pulse every day for 7 years. It can't be that he's always been wrong, right?" the Empress asked worriedly. These words not only reminded Han Yunshi, but Emperor Tianhui and the crown prince as well, thoroughly shattering their hopes. A trifling pulse was easy enough for an ordinary doctor, much less Han Kongan. A complicated look flitted past Han Yunshi's eyes, but her attitude was still firm. "It's his fault. Yunshi, why don't you stay here for a few days and observe a bit more?" the Empress probed. "I'm 100% certain that he's mistaken." Han Yunshi's voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with unquestionable authority. Seeing her serious and resolute expression, even the Empress wavered. At this moment, Long Tianma spoke up. "Imperial Father, summon Han Kongan to confront her." Emperor Tianhui hesitated before agreeing. "Someone come. Summon Han Kongan here." While they waited, the room was silent. Everyone looked at Han Yunshi with doubtful and expectant gazes. As a doctor, Han Yunshi was used to such looks. As if no one else was present, she sat quietly on one side, her mind doing its best to search for similar cases she'd heard of before. The Crown Prince's illness was indeed very strange, but it did not mean that there was no precedent. In her memory, she had heard of similar cases when she was in school. There were no more than 100 similar cases recorded in the modern medical history of the world. It could be said that it was very rare. She had her suspicions when she took his pulse, but after seeing the Crown Prince's big belly, she was more or less certain. Sarcoma and whatnot were just excuses. As for what illness it was, she knew she couldn't say it out loud. Once she did, she'd definitely lose her life. Her current problem was how to deny Han Kongan's diagnosis. Soon enough, Han Kongan arrived. He was in his 50s and sported a white goatee. He was dressed in long, gray robes. Although he tried to keep a low profile in the palace, it was difficult to hide the dignity and bearing of a clan head. This was Han Yunshi's first time seeing her father since transmigrating to this world. After Han Kongan entered, he greeted each and every one of them. Even when facing Han Yunshi, he still bowed respectfully and called her Qin Wang Fei. Han Yunshi's tone was cold as she said, "Dispense with the formalities." Towards this father of hers, she not only felt unfamiliar, but also hatred. Han Yunshi hated men who were jealous of women the most in her life, but Han Kongan was such a person. Why had Lady Tianxin died in childbirth back then? Why had she been born an ugly girl with the most common poison scars growing up? Why hadn't a doctor from a distinguished medical family treated her? Han Yunshi would find answers to these questions sooner or later. The Empress couldn't wait to speak up. Han Kongan, Qin Wangfei has determined that the Crown Prince's stomach is a malignant tumor. What do you think? Han Kongan originally thought that Han Yunshi would be helpless against such a strange illness, which was why Emperor Tianhui had summoned him. But who knew this was the case? He looked at Han Yunshi in disbelief. This damn girl was too daring. Even if she studied the medical books left behind by her mother, they were only about detoxification techniques. She actually dared to make such a diagnosis? Han Kongan shook his head. Qin Wangfei, do you have proof for the malignant tumor? Then do you have proof for the fetus? Han Yunshi retorted. Han Kongan's lips curved into a mocking smile. The pulse is proof. So is His Highness Crown Prince's stomach. Qin Wangfei, even Cloud Realm Medical Academy's directors have confirmed that this is a pregnancy pulse. It's the pulse that's in dispute. It's not enough proof. Han Yunshi's attitude was unyielding. If not for her status and everyone else present, Han Kongan would have lost his temper long ago. No wonder the Empress Dowager and Grand Concubine Yi's men had been looking for him to investigate. This damned girl had really changed into a different person. If this was the past, she wouldn't have dared to speak to him like this even after she became Qin Wangfei. Then how did you tell it was a malignant tumor? Han Kongan asked. No matter how skilled this damned girl was, her diagnosis couldn't be separated from the pulse. Since she said the pulse wasn't enough proof, he'd like to see what proof she had. Poison, Han Yunshi said confidently. That word alone made everyone suck in a cold breath. It was actually poison? His Highness Crown Prince has been poisoned with a type of poison called tumor poison. It's not fatal, but it stays in the body for a long time and absorbs the foul qi from the organs to form a malignant tumor. Once the tumor grows big enough to press on the major meridians, it'll be life-threatening. This was actually a lie made up by Han Yunshi, but she said it calmly as if it were true. Everyone present was stupefied. They never thought such a strange poison existed in the world, nor that the Crown Prince's strange illness was like this. This had nothing to do with a pregnancy pulse or pregnancy. Compared to a man getting pregnant, Han Yunshi's explanation was much more reasonable and believable. Even the Empress, who wanted to make things difficult for Han Yunshi, revealed a look of pleasant surprise. How she wanted to believe in Han Yunshi right now. Han Kongan gave a start as well. It took him a while to speak. Then do you have proof? Han Yunshi wouldn't foolishly say she could tell from the pulse. Her eyes flashed with self-confidence as she said, I can neutralize the poison and remove the malignant tumor. It's already been 7 years. Can you deliver a child? Han Kongan finally couldn't take it anymore. He took 2 steps back with a look of disbelief. Those who didn't know would think they were competitors when they looked at the father and daughter pair. Esteemed Princess Consort, you can't joke around with the Crown Prince's life, Han Kongan said seriously. Although he wasn't familiar with poisons, he didn't want to believe that the Crown Prince was poisoned. The pulse was clearly a pregnancy pulse, and there was clearly a life in the stomach. Even if he was wrong, how could the most authoritative medical school be wrong? Although the directors of the medical school had all left, he had secretly consulted with the directors to discuss this issue over the years. The pregnancy pulse was certain. They needed to discuss how to make the Crown Prince's stomach disappear and how to kill the fetus that shouldn't exist without endangering the Crown Prince's life. Abortion pills had no effect at all and could only be delivered. However, giving birth to a child was dangerous for a woman, let alone a man. To be exact, they still didn't understand how a man could give birth to a child. Cutting the abdomen was something they dared to think about but didn't dare to do. Moreover, if the child was really cut out, his life would be over. The emperor had long believed in the pregnancy pulse, but he still held the hope that it was a misdiagnosis. This princess consort isn't joking around with the Crown Prince's life. On the contrary, you can't even see the poison pulse and dragged it out for 7 years. Do you know that if the poison was cured earlier, the Crown Prince's stomach wouldn't be so big? It's you who wasted 7 years of the Crown Prince's life. Han Yunshi angrily retorted. She admitted that she was taking this opportunity to take revenge. Don't think that she didn't know that Han Kongan had a hand in the young general's matter. Not to mention that she was bullied in her maternal family. Just the fact that he sacrificed his daughter to curry favor with the Empress Dowager was enough to make Han Yunshi hate him for a lifetime. Was this kind of person worthy of being her father? You're talking nonsense. Nonsense. Han Kongan was anxious. He didn't care about his status and angrily rebuked. Who knew that Han Yunshi would angrily reprimand, bold Han Kongan? Is this the attitude you should have when speaking to this princess consort? What's the punishment for offending one's superiors? Her words surprised everyone present. Nobody expected Han Yunshi, the unfavored Qin Wangfei, to put on the airs of a Wangfei in front of Han Kongan. This woman, isn't she a little too interesting? The curve of Long Fei Ye's lips grew more and more beautiful, while Emperor Tianhui began to stroke his chin in amusement. Han Kongan was dumbstruck as he shook his head in disbelief. He couldn't speak for a long time. Han Yunshi loftily looked at him disdainfully. Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, we'll know once the malignant tumor is taken out. So speaking, she turned towards Emperor Tianhui. Your Majesty, I've already told you the results of my diagnosis. Whether or not he'll be treated is up to your Majesty to decide. Chapter 54. To treat or not to treat. Qin Wangfei, you mean to say that you have a way to treat the Crown Prince? Emperor Tianhui asked seriously. A case like the Crown Prince's could be diagnosed with an ultrasound in modern times. Then, an open abdominal surgery would be carried out immediately. It was just a surgery similar to a cesarean section. However, in ancient times, it was a little difficult to perform such a surgery. Even so, Han Yunshi still nodded without hesitation. Naturally, she had other methods. How do you treat him? Long Tianma asked urgently. His words immediately exposed his trust in Han Yunshi. I'll make an antidote for the tumor poison and dissolve the giant tumor into poisonous blood. Then I'll cut open the abdomen and do my best to use acupuncture techniques to expel the poison. Han Yunshi replied truthfully. If she cut open the Crown Prince's stomach to take out the thing, it'd be an extremely deep incision. Without any suturing tools, she wouldn't take the risk. But if she used medicine to dissolve the thing in the Crown Prince's stomach into blood, and then opened his mouth to expel the poison, then it'd be a small operation similar to the one she performed on young General Mu Qingguo. As long as she didn't lose too much blood, then the risks of this plan were completely within her control. As soon as she finished speaking, Han Kongan spoke up. Then you still can't prove that the Crown Prince's stomach is a malignant tumor. If the tumor turns into blood, Divine Dr. Han can take the blood to see if there's any poison. Han Yunshi's lips curved into a mocking smile as she deliberately emphasized the words Divine Dr. Han. Han Kongan's face alternated between red and white. He hated her to the core, but couldn't speak. You'll have to cut open the abdomen, the Empress hesitated. This isn't appropriate. The Empress Dowager hesitated as well, her face full of worry. This was genuine worry, since the Crown Prince was her most beloved eldest grandson. When Chunxia treated the young general's poison, I cut open the abdomen as well. Because of this, the Empress Dowager misunderstood. Esteemed Empress Dowager, if you still don't believe Chunxia, you can summon the young general to take a look. The wound on his abdomen should still have a scar. Han Yunshi's tone was very calm. Anger flashed through the Empress Dowager's eyes. This damn girl, she's still thinking about that. She's clearly mocking me. The Empress Dowager fell silent. Once the success story was out in the open, Han Yunshi tossed the hot potato to Emperor Tianhui and put him in charge of the situation. Your Majesty, Yunshi has already explained everything clearly. It's up to you whether to treat him or not. Emperor Tianhui and Long Tianma stared at each other through the muslin curtains, neither of them speaking. Han Yunshi was smart enough to come up with a diagnosis completely different from Han Kongan's. If Emperor Tianhui believed her, then he'd let her treat him. If he didn't, then there was no reason to make things difficult for her. Under such circumstances, Han Kongan didn't dare to speak too much. After all, he hadn't been able to come up with a treatment plan for so many years. If he continued to speak, he would be courting death. For a moment, the room fell silent. Unexpectedly, Emperor Tianhui slowly turned to face Long Fei Yi. Duke of Qin, what do you think? Han Yunqi was surprised that Emperor Tianhui would ask about Long Fei Yi. Still, Long Fei Yi didn't panic, as if he'd long expected the question. His expression was indifferent and inscrutable. This matter is of great importance. Imperial brother can make the decision. His words left the initiative in Emperor Tianhui's hands. Of course, Emperor Tianhui wasn't easy to deal with. He continued to ask, does the Duke of Qin believe Qin Wangfei? Her question forced Long Fei to give a direct answer. Han Yunqi was puzzled, feeling that something wasn't right. Rumors said that Emperor Tianhui and the Duke of Qin were close brothers. The Duke of Qin held great power, so Emperor Tianhui had to yield to him. But judging from the current situation, the relationship between Emperor Tianhui and the Duke of Qin wasn't close at all. In fact, it was very subtle. If Long Fei Yi said he believed Emperor Tianhui's words, then wouldn't he be guilty if Han Yunqi made a mistake? If Long Fei Yi said he didn't believe her, then Han Yunqi would be finished. Now everyone was looking at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi had personally gone to General Mu's estate to save Han Yunqi. Would he still open his mouth this time? Why did he go to General Mu's estate to teach Changping and the Justice Court official a lesson and rescue Han Yunqi from her predicament? Why did he allow the existence of the red handkerchief? Did he and Han Yunqi really have sex as husband and wife? Was it because Han Yunqi wasn't ugly anymore and had medical skills that he saw Han Yunqi in a different light and acknowledged her as his official consort? There were plenty of people here who were curious about these questions. Everyone was waiting for Long Fei Yi's answer, but he only said, "It's useless for your lordship to believe her. Only His Majesty and the Crown Prince will believe her." His simple words were enough to deal with 1,000 caddies with 4 tails and dissolve Emperor Tianhui's trap. Han Yunqi almost laughed out loud. This guy really was a crafty old fox. Emperor Tianhui pursed his lips and was about to ask more questions when Long Fei Yi said, "Imperial brother, the Crown Prince isn't young anymore. It's time for him to be independent." Without a doubt, these words meant that the Crown Prince should make his own decisions. The Duke of Qin's support was crucial to every imperial son. Naturally, the emperor wanted him to support the Crown Prince. Emperor Tianhui put on a false smile as he looked towards the Crown Prince. "Tianma, your imperial uncle's lecturing is right. Make your own decisions." It had been 7 years. Long Tianma had truly had enough. Even if he still didn't trust Han Yunqi in the depths of his heart, he'd rather take a gamble than wait for death. He knew better than anyone else that if this illness dragged on, his imperial father would definitely give up on him. In the silence, Long Tianma's voice was especially clear. "I'll accept treatment." Han Yunqi exhaled in relief, while Han Konggen's entire face turned black on the side. Without a doubt, the Crown Prince's reaction had thoroughly rejected him. Emperor Tianhui was very satisfied with the Crown Prince's courageous decision. He nodded and said, "Qin Wangfei, can we begin immediately? I need to do a detailed examination to determine the location and size of the sarcoma before I can prescribe the medicine," Han Yunqi said seriously. Once she decided on treatment, her entire body was filled with energy. She immediately went to do a detailed examination. Very soon, she discovered that the thing in Long Tianma's stomach was even bigger than she'd imagined. Moreover, it really did have a life of its own. She pressed a few acupuncture points and found that the thing could move. Her eyes flickered between light and darkness, filled with complicated emotions. "How is it?" Long Tianma asked anxiously. Han Yunqi smiled. "Don't worry. You just need to rest well for the next 2 days. Don't think about anything else." So speaking, she withdrew from the room. The Empress and Empress Dowager surrounded her as well. "How is it? Can you treat it right away? What kind of medicine do you need? Just tell me." "The prescription is a bit complicated. I'll have to think it over carefully before I can be sure," Han Yunqi said seriously. At this moment, Han Konggen hastily volunteered himself. "Qin Wangfei, this old man isn't talented, but I'm familiar with medicine. I'm willing to assist you." If Han Yunqi couldn't treat it, the Han family would be hard-pressed to escape calamity. If she did, he'd be able to bask in the glory if he helped her. Of course, more importantly, he wanted to see where this damned girl got her confidence from and how she was going to treat him. But Han Yunshi only pretended not to hear him and said, "Your Majesty, I want to invite Imperial Physician Gu Beiwei to assist me." Compared to Han Kongan, Emperor Tianhui naturally trusted Gu Beiwei more. He immediately agreed. "Someone come, summon Gu Beiwei here." Han Yunshi stopped him. "Your Majesty, this isn't a small matter. I'll go to the Imperial Physician courtyard to discuss the details with Imperial Physician Gu. I'll write out a prescription before sunset." There were a lot of people here, so Emperor Tianhui nodded and ordered someone to bring Han Yunshi over. Han Kongan looked on with wide eyes, but the Empress Dowager spoke up cold. "Divine Dr. Han, I think you should go back and wait for your daughter's good news." "Esteemed Empress Dowager, this commoner has served His Highness for 7 years and understands his condition best. Why don't you let this commoner stay, just in case?" Before Han Kongan could finish, the Empress lost her temper. Pa, pa. Han Kongan, what kind of unlucky things are you saying? Useless thing, you still have the face to stand here. Let me tell you, you were the one who brought out the pregnancy pulse. Once the Crown Prince recovers, I'll deal with you properly. Han Kongan was too scared to speak, but quickly asked to be excused and fled. Looking at Han Kongan's wretched figure, the Empress's eyes grew dark. She thought, if Han Yunshi can cure Tianma this time, then I'll temporarily forget about Chongping's debt. I'll just treat it as her meritorious service atoning for her crimes. But if she couldn't cure him, she'd definitely uproot the Han family and make this medical family disappear from Cloud Realm continent forever. She'd make Han Yunshi a criminal who exterminated her family. The Empress Dowager and Empress didn't leave, but stood guard by Long Tianma's bedside. Emperor Tianhui didn't seem to want to leave either, his expression grave. It had to be said that they were all nervous. This was the Crown Prince's last chance. If Han Yunshi couldn't save him, then Emperor Tianhui could only reluctantly give him up. But the result was in Han Yunshi's hands. No one could predict it. Long Feiyi seemed to be the most indifferent one. He rose to walk over and said, "Imperial brother, let's go. Chindi will accompany you to drink tea." Emperor Tianhui recovered his wits and nodded before following Long Feiyi out the door. It's easy to rule a country, but difficult to rule a family. Emperor Tianhui sighed with emotion. Heaven helps the worthy, the Crown Prince. Imperial brother, don't worry, Long Feiyi said mildly. Emperor Tianhui had tried to sound him out more than once, but couldn't figure out his attitude. Every time, he could only give up. As he grew older, neither the Crown Prince nor any of the other imperial sons were a match for the Duke of Qin. Actually, if the Empress Dowager hadn't schemed against Grand Concubine Yi in the past, he wouldn't have been able to take the throne in the first place. Northernly was Tianning's enemy, but in Emperor Tianhui's eyes, his younger brother, who was about the same age as him, was even more terrifying than Northern Li's ferocious army. How's the investigation of the Northern Li spies going? Emperor Tianhui asked. There's still a big fish lurking in the shadows. Chindi's already cast the net. Long Feiyi replied honestly. You have to know that these spies wouldn't have been able to stir up such a storm without a mole, Emperor Tianhui reminded him cold. Chindi understands. Imperial brother can be at ease. Long Feiyi was neither flustered nor anxious, so calm that it made others feel cold. The two of them chatted as they walked into the Imperial Gardens. At the same time, Han Yunshi had just arrived at the Imperial Physician Courtyard. Gu Beiwei was the head of the Imperial Physician Courtyard, which naturally fell under his sphere of influence. As soon as he heard that Han Yunshi had come because of the Crown Prince, he immediately dismissed all of the medical attendants in his study and ordered them to stand guard outside the door. No one was allowed to approach. Han Yunshi hadn't even said a word, but she couldn't help but silently admire Gu Beiwei's strength despite his frail appearance. If Long Feiyi was an icy fox, then this man was a gentle one. He personally closed the door behind him and walked over with a faint smile. Qin Wangfei, has the diagnosis been made? If it was anyone else in his place, they'd definitely be nervous. But Gu Beiwei was always so calm. Han Yunshi especially liked to see his warm smile, because it could calm her down in an instant. But every time, she was the one who broke the calm in his eyes. It's not a pregnancy pulse, she said with a smile. Chapter 55. Not a pregnancy pulse? Gu Beiwei was a little surprised and patiently waited for Han Yunqi to continue. But there is indeed a life in the stomach, Han Yunqi said directly. Since it was not a pregnancy pulse and there was a life in the stomach, what was going on? Gu Beiwei frowned slightly and did not say anything, waiting for Han Yunqi to continue. However, Han Yunqi's face became serious. I will only tell you the results of the diagnosis. Are you willing to know? Gu Beiwei was shocked. What is going on? I need your help, but you have to keep it a secret, Han Yunqi said again. Gu Beiwei nodded without hesitation. Perhaps even he did not know why he trusted Han Yunqi so much. Other than Gu Beiwei, Han Yunqi really could not find a second person she could trust. This secret was too scary. In the modern era, even modern people might not be able to accept it, let alone ancient people. She said in a low voice, the Crown Prince's illness is called fetus in fetus. Strictly speaking, the child in his stomach is the Empress's. When these words came out, the usually calm Gu Beiwei took 2 steps back and revealed a shocked expression. However, he quickly calmed down. Qin Wangfei, you can't say such things carelessly. Han Yunqi was helpless and wanted to laugh. She had once again broken this guy's calmness under his gentleness. She smiled faintly. I know. Listen to my explanation first. Gu Beiwei then came closer and nodded. When the Empress was pregnant with the Crown Prince, she was actually pregnant with 2 children. However, before the child was formed, the Crown Prince wrapped the other child in his body. To be exact, a fetus in fetus was a parasitic fetus. It meant that when twin embryos were developing, one embryo was wrapped in the other embryo and stayed in the baby's body. It grew with the baby, absorbed the baby's nutrients, and developed abnormally. Under different circumstances, some fetus in the womb developed quickly and would be discovered early. However, some fetus in the womb developed slowly and would only be discovered after many years. The longest recorded case in the history of medicine was 32 years. Long Tianma was not even 20 years old this year, so it was not a long time. Gu Beiwei didn't know anything about cells or embryos. Han Yunqi could only explain it to him in the simplest terms. That is to say, the Empress was pregnant with twins, but before the fetus was formed, one of the Crown Princes wrapped the other child in his body. Later, the Crown Prince was formed and born, and the other life was left in his body. It relied on the nutrients in his blood to sustain itself and gradually grew up. Gu Beiwei finally understood. He shook his head in disbelief. I didn't expect something like this to happen. Of course, he didn't believe that men could give birth to children. But after so many years, although he didn't participate in the Crown Prince's treatment, he had flipped through medical books to study this case. Although he was very shocked by Han Yunqi's explanation, in his view, Han Yunqi's explanation was reasonable. Gu Beiwei was silent. Suddenly, he raised his head to look at Han Yunqi. His gaze was grave as he said seriously, "This life cannot be taken. Although it has been said for so many years that it is a pregnancy pulse, the Emperor is not willing to believe it." Han Yunqi naturally knew that this life could not be taken. Otherwise, she wouldn't have kept it a secret and made up some nonsense about abdominal sarcoma. A fetus in the womb was basically not a normal and healthy child. Some only had 4 limbs and no heart or brain. This was a life that wouldn't live for long even if it was saved. Not to mention this, even if it was a complete and healthy child, it was also not to be taken. How could the Crown Prince have a child? If a child was really born, anyone who knew of this matter would definitely be silenced, including the Crown Prince and this child. If this matter was spread, the Imperial Long clan would be accused of being Yao. It would give those restless rebel factions enough excuse to incite the people. Of course, Han Yunqi didn't care about that much. She only knew that she couldn't tell the truth. Moreover, she had to save this person in order to live. Seeing Gu Beiwei's grave gaze, Han Yunqi's voice became cold. So, I have to nip it in the bud. Your father has prescribed a lot of abortion pills, but none of them have any effect. Gu Beiwei seriously reminded. Han Yunqi's lips curled in disdain. Of course his pills won't be effective. Abortion pills are for women. The pills that Han Kongan prescribed were only effective for pregnant women. Strictly speaking, Long Tianma wasn't pregnant. How could it be effective? I need a type of poison to dissolve the thing in the crown prince's stomach into blood water. Then I'll expel the poison from his body. The emperor and the rest will only see poison water. The crown prince isn't pregnant, but has a malignant tumor. Han Yunqi's tone was very certain. Hearing this, Gu Beiwei was silent for a moment before giving a thumbs up. Without a doubt, Han Yunqi's method was the most appropriate. Not only did it protect herself, it also kept this secret forever. People who didn't know the truth would never have a knot in their heart. His Highness the Crown Prince should thank you. Gu Beiwei smiled. Han Yunqi helplessly shrugged. I just hope that his imperial mother won't make trouble for me in the future. Gu Beiwei knew that poison wasn't difficult for Han Yunqi. Why did this woman need his help? You need me. Gu Beiwei hesitated. Han Yunqi's resolute gaze suddenly dimmed. That thing's extremely large. This incision will be at least 10 times harder than the one with the young general. It's very possible that the crown prince will die from excessive blood loss before even half of the blood is drained out. The medicine Han Yunqi had prepared for the crown prince was actually poison. She could use the poison to dissolve the thing in his abdomen, so that she could create a medicine with precise effects that wouldn't harm the organs. It would only dissolve the thing into blood and water. This way, the blood would be poisonous and had to be expelled immediately. Right now, her biggest problem was excessive blood loss. She had to have enough time to expel the poison. In the modern era, a blood transfusion would be enough. But right now, she could only place her hopes on Gu Beiwei. Gu Beiwei understood as soon as he heard the question. He looked at Han Yunqi, a complicated look in his eyes. It was a long time before he spoke. I know of a medicine called the lifeblood pill. After taking it, it'll have the effect of creating blood for a short period of time. Before he could finish, Han Yunqi was pleasantly surprised. Where is this medicine? Seeing her anxious expression, Gu Beiwei's eyes flashed with doting. Qin Wangfei, this medicine isn't easy to get. The imperial clan has plenty of money and power. What's there to be afraid of? Han Yunqi blurted out. All right. In her heart, the imperial clan was a bunch of nouveau riche and bandits. Gu Beiwei felt even more helpless as he murmured, Qin Wangfei, in Cloud Realm Continent, Tianning's imperial clan is just one of many powers. Han Yunqi naturally knew that Cloud Realm Continent was huge and filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers. But right now, she was most concerned about the whereabouts of the lifeblood pill. With it, treating the crown prince's condition would be a matter of minutes. Then tell me, just who has it? Han Yunqi grew anxious. Gu Beiwei only gave her 3 words. Gu Qisha. Gu Qisha? Han Yunqi seemed to have heard of this famous name somewhere in the depths of her memories. She muttered, that ghost genius Gu Qisha who was banished from Cloud Realm Medical Academy? Gu Beiwei nodded. Exactly. That fellow was born a ghost genius and had a gift for growing medicinal plants. Many of the commonly used plants today were grafted on by him when he was young. People call him the pill fiend. I heard he's the adopted son of an elder from the medical academy and grew up eating medicinal plants for his 3 meals? Han Yunqi asked curiously. Gu Beiwei nodded. That was all he knew. Although his grandfather was a director of the medical academy, he was a level lower than an elder. He had no way of getting in touch with the people above him, and he hadn't stayed long at the academy before following his grandfather to Tianning's capital city. Then where's Gu Qisha now? Han Yunqi asked hastily. After he was banished from the medical academy, he set up his own shop and founded the Medicine Ghost Valley. His specialty is to collect and cultivate all sorts of miraculous pills and medicines. He buys and sells them based on his mood. So it's no easy task to buy the lifeblood pill from him, Gu Beiwei said. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi's expression was relaxed. I thought you'd have to put in a lot of effort, but I didn't expect it to be so easy. A single medicinal pills is all it takes. Those medicinal pills aren't easy to get. Gu Beiwei had to remind her once more. Han Yunqi chuckled. I'm only responsible for writing out the prescription. I'm not responsible for finding the medicine. This, seeing Han Yunqi's sly smile, Gu Beiwei finally understood what she meant. As long as she wrote out the prescription, the emperor would naturally find a way to get his hands on the lifeblood pill. If he couldn't get his hands on it, then it couldn't be blamed on the 2 of them, the doctors. Han Yunxi immediately went to the desk and wrote down the medicinal ingredients and their quantities. Gu Beiwei was naturally curious, so he looked at her seriously from the side. However, the more he looked, the more he didn't understand. He recognized all the medicinal ingredients on the prescription, but unfortunately, he couldn't understand what they were used for. To use poison to dissolve the thing in the crown prince's abdomen without harming his internal organs, the amount of effort needed to put in the medicine wasn't just ordinary. Very quickly, Han Yunxi finished writing out the prescription and wrote the lifeblood pill at the end. Qin Wangfei, this prescription, is it complete? Gu Beiwei asked suspiciously. Han Yunxi looked at him meaningfully. It's a secret. Of course, this prescription wasn't complete. Moreover, no matter who got their hands on it, they wouldn't be able to tell that it was a poison because the 3 most important ingredients weren't written on it. The prescription was just a formality. She had the antidote in her detox system long ago. Han Yunxi had to hold back a trick or two. If she wrote down the real prescription and it fell into the hands of an expert one day, wouldn't they be able to use it against her and see the truth behind her treatment of the crown prince? Gu Beiwei looked at Han Yunxi's mysterious appearance and didn't ask further, but the fondness in his eyes deepened. With the lifeblood pill, Han Yunxi's biggest problem was solved. She almost couldn't wait to become the crown prince's savior and see how the Empress Dowager and Empress would react. Of course, she was looking forward to Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru's reactions even more. Right now, they had to be waiting anxiously at the Duke of Qin's estate. She had to get the lifeblood pill first. Hurry and go. We have to hand over the prescription. Han Yunxi tugged on Gu Beiwei's arm and prepared to leave. Gu Beiwei gave a start and hesitated for a second before pushing her aside. He didn't say a word, but Han Yunxi gave a start before unconsciously looking back. Gu Beiwei immediately avoided her gaze. This guy. Han Yunxi burst into laughter, but didn't explain. All right. She was so happy that she'd forgotten that this was ancient times and that she was a married woman. Male best friends and whatnot weren't allowed. Cough, cough. She coughed lightly as if nothing had happened and turned back. My hands were quick. I wasn't trying to molest you. Gu Beiwei was about to leave when he gave a start. But soon enough, a gentle smile bloomed on his face. Han Yunxi didn't know that she'd missed the most beautiful smile in the world. Chapter 56. Han Yunxi presented the prescription to Emperor Tianhui and told him the importance of the lifeblood pill. She secretly calculated that no matter how Emperor Tianhui begged for the medicine, it'd take at least 10 days to half a month. During this time, she could return to the Duke of Qin's estate and stay put. With such a heavy responsibility on her shoulders, she'd like to see what Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru could do to her. Moreover, she could use Imperial Physician Gu as an excuse to enter and leave the Imperial Physician Courtyard as she pleased. The Imperial Physician Courtyard had plenty of medical books and medicinal ingredients. To her, this place was simply a treasure trove. Han Yunxi exhaled in relief after handing over the prescription, but who knew? Emperor Tianhui set down the prescription and looked towards Long Fei Yi. Duke of Qin, Medicine Ghost Valley isn't an ordinary place. You should make a trip there yourself. Although he spoke in a tone of discussion, everyone knew this was an imperial order. Long Fei Ye's face was still as cold as ever as he nodded.
Yes.
Han Yunxi glanced at him and couldn't help but rejoice in his misfortune. Big Ice Cube, ah, Big Ice Cube. Who told you to stand by with folded arms? Now you're a fish in the moat who gets caught in the crossfire. The lifeblood pill isn't so easy to buy. If you can't buy it back, then the blame will be on your shoulders. Your Majesty, the Imperial Physician Courtyard has all the other ingredients listed in this prescription. Yunxi and Imperial Physician Gu will prepare them as soon as possible. Once the lifeblood pill arrives, we can begin treatment immediately, Han Yunxi said seriously. Emperor Tianhui nodded. Then we'll wait for the Duke of Qin's good news. Everyone dispersed. Han Yunxi used the excuse of going to prepare medicine with Gu Beiwei and didn't return with Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't pay her any more attention either. The Empress accompanied the Empress Dowager the entire way out, deeply worried. Mu Fei, this, Chunxie's heart is in a mess. Can Han Yunxi be trusted or not? The Empress Dowager's heart was also uncertain. After hesitating for a moment, she let out a long sigh. If this girl can cure Tianma this time, then Aijia will definitely put her in an important position. Back then, Lady Tianxin saved the Empress Dowager's life. The Empress Dowager betrothed Han Yunqi to the Duke of Qin as a chess piece. She wanted to have Han Yunqi spy by the Duke of Qin's side. But who knew that Han Yunqi would grow up to be a good-for-nothing ugly girl, and Han Kongan was unable to cure the crown prince. The Empress nodded and said nothing more. Han Yunqi didn't return to the Duke of Qin's estate until late at night with an empty stomach. As soon as she entered the gates, Grand Concubine Yi summoned her. Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru had been restless all day, waiting for news. What did Han Yunqi's safe return mean? How is the crown prince? Can it be treated? Grand Concubine Yi got straight to the point. Han Yunqi was puzzled. Didn't Long Fei Yi leave first? Could it be that he hadn't come back yet? She didn't care so much. When she saw Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru's expectant looks, her eyes flashed with contempt. She pretended to sigh, but stopped herself. Sister-in-law, just how is it? Mu Fei and I've been worried all day, Murong Wanru asked anxiously. Nothing much, just like that, Han Yunqi said mildly. Like that? Grand Concubine Yi couldn't help asking. It's not a big problem. I have ways to treat it. Han Yunqi finally exposed the truth. She didn't miss the astonishment in Grand Concubine Yi's eyes, nor did she miss Murong Wanru's jealous look. Those who wanted to see her make a fool of herself would only be laughed at back. In other words, you've cured the crown prince? Murong Wanru asked impatiently. He's missing one more ingredient, but that ingredient is very hard to find. We'll have to go to Medicine Ghost Valley to buy it, Han Yunqi replied honestly. Grand Concubine Yi exhaled at these words, while Murong Wanru's lips curved into a mocking smile. I've heard of Medicine Ghost Valley before. Its owner is called His Excellency Pill Fiend, and he's a very difficult eccentric who never gives face to anyone. 8 or 9 out of 10 people who go to buy the medicine come back empty-handed. Some even risk their lives to buy it. The nervous Grand Concubine Yi grew calm and composed. So it's like that. Then it'll be very troublesome to cure the crown prince. Han Yunqi agreed wholeheartedly as she nodded her head. Exactly. It'll be very troublesome. But very quickly, she changed the topic. But the Emperor sent His Highness Duke of Qin to ask for the medicine. As I see it, this shouldn't be too difficult, right? Both Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru gave a start at these words. Immediately, Grand Concubine Yi slapped the table in anger. What? He's sending the Duke of Qin to Medicine Ghost Valley? Han Yunqi's expression was both naive and earnest as she nodded her head. If the Duke of Qin goes, he'll definitely get the medicine. The Emperor's decision won't be wrong. Grand Concubine Yi's heart felt stifled as she clenched her fists, narrowly avoiding a slap. But Han Yunqi's last words of the Emperor's decision forced her to swallow her anger. On one side, Murong Wanru was completely stupefied. Everyone knew that Medicine Ghost Valley wasn't a good place, much less a place to buy medicine. What if something happened to the Duke of Qin? What if he didn't come back with the medicine? Then wouldn't the Duke of Qin have to shoulder all the blame? Why did Han Yunqi's troubles end up in the Duke of Qin's lap instead? If she knew things would turn out like this, she wouldn't have spread rumors to kill Han Yunqi. Murong Wanru's face turned green with regret as well as her intestines. After a tiring day, Han Yunqi came back to see mother and daughter suffer in silence. Her spirits were refreshed, and she forgot all about her exhaustion. Mu Fei, the Emperor ordered Chunxia to rest well for the next few days and make the best preparations to treat the crown prince. It's getting late. Chunxia will withdraw first. As she spoke, she bowed respectfully and casually turned around to leave. Grand Concubine Yi was so angry that she could explode at any moment. Blue veins popped out on the back of her hands as she clenched them into fists, but there was nothing she could do to Han Yunqi. The Emperor wasn't someone Grand Concubine Yi dared to provoke lightly. Just who spread those rumors? They deserved to die. Grand Concubine Yi raged. Murong Wanru's heart pounded, but she didn't dare to make a sound. Han Yunqi's footsteps were light and quick. This was the first time she discovered the benefits of imperial power in this world. When she returned to the hibiscus courtyard, Han Yunxi couldn't help but stop when she saw the darkness of Long Fei Ye's quarters. That guy hadn't come back. So where did he go? Did he head straight for the Medicine Ghost Valley? That's too fast, isn't it? She bit her lip and thought, that guy's martial arts are so good. He shouldn't have run into any danger in the Medicine Ghost Valley, right? Moreover, he's so famous that maybe Pill Fiend Gu Qisha will give him face. Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi felt even more at ease and gracefully turned ahead for her leisurely cloud pavilion. Leisurely Cloud Pavilion was brightly lit. Han Yunxi thought that little Chun Xiang must have been worried about her and lit the lanterns to wait for her to come back. Although little Chun Xiang was a servant girl, having someone at home waiting for her was still a warm feeling. Little Chun Xiang, Han Yunxi shouted before she even entered. She was starving and needed Chan Xiang to find her something to eat. Little Chun Xiang, you, unexpectedly, just as she reached the loft's entrance, she saw little Chun Xiang standing timidly by the door with her head lowered. Inside the room, a certain guy was brewing tea. From Han Yunxi's angle, the steam from the tea rose in spirals, and the man was as beautiful as a painting. Honestly, it didn't feel real at all. Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi couldn't help but mutter. The person inside the room was none other than the Duke of Qin, Long Fei Yi. From the looks of it, he seemed to be waiting for her. Mistress, His Highness has been waiting for you for a long time, Chun Xiang reminded her in a low voice, and Han Yunxi finally came back to her senses. Waited for a long time? Could it be that he came to her after leaving the palace? Han Yunxi hurriedly walked in. This concubine greets His Highness. Long Fei Yi poured tea and didn't even raise his eyes as he said indifferently, "You've finished preparing the medicine?" "Amin," Han Yunxi responded, her heart beating like a drum. She couldn't figure out why this guy had come. She knew that this guy was smarter than the emperor, but even so, he shouldn't be able to see through the crown prince's illness. What did he come here for? Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi stood up and said indifferently, "Then pack up and follow this prince to the Medicine Ghost Valley." "What?" Han Yunxi exclaimed. Long Fei Yi raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Is there a problem?" Yes, there was a big problem. It wasn't a good place, so why did he want her to go? Han Yunxi had already answered in her heart, but her face revealed an awkward expression as she helplessly said, "Your Highness, this concubine doesn't know that medicine ghost and can't help. I'm afraid that I'll be a burden to your Highness." "This prince isn't afraid of you being a burden," Long Fei Yi said. Han Yunxi sighed softly and said, "But this concubine still has some details to discuss with Imperial Physician Gu. I'm afraid. The Crown Prince has been ill for 7 years. A few more days won't make a difference. It won't be too late to come back for a visit," Long Fei Yi continued. "Your Highness, if something unexpected happens to this concubine on the way, it'll be hard to explain to His Majesty," Han Yunxi threatened boldly. Unfortunately, she could only threaten Grand Concubine Yi, but not Long Fei Yi. He was very domineering. "There won't be any unexpected mishaps." Han Yunxi felt gloomy, but couldn't think of a reason to refuse him no matter how hard she racked her brains. Thus, she changed the subject. "Your Highness, why do you suddenly want this concubine to go with you?" It was fine to ask the reason, right? But Long Fei Yi didn't answer, his tone cold and unyielding. "I'll give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea to prepare. Your lordship will wait for you at the back door." So speaking, he turned and left, leaving Han Yunxi standing there in a daze with a crumbling face. "Long Fei Yi, you win." How could the time it took to brew a cup of tea be enough for Han Yunxi to pack up? But little Chun Xiang had already prepared her luggage, as well as some snacks to allay her hunger. Without a doubt, this was what Long Fei Yi had told Chun Xiang to prepare. He'd steeled his heart to take her along. Han Yunxi wanted to cry, but had no tears. Chun Xiang, on the other hand, was very happy. "Mistress, I heard them say that His Highness never takes a woman out. Moreover, he never uses a female servant. You're the first." Han Yunxi's mouth twitched. She was probably the only woman in the world who knew that nothing good would come of going out with His Highness Duke of Qin. "Mistress, what kind of place is that Medicine Ghost Valley? What are they going to do there? How long will they be gone for?" Chun Xiang asked curiously as she sent Han Yunxi out. Han Yunqi rolled her eyes. You're so excited. Do you want to come along? Chen Xiang was so scared that she immediately retreated back into the room. She shook her head vigorously and smiled ambiguously. Her face was red from smiling. With this servant here, it'll be inconvenient for you. Han Yunqi looked at the sky, speechless. This little Chen Xiang was so young, yet so mischievous. Did she think they were going on a honeymoon? She helplessly shook her head, too lazy to explain. She waved at Chen Xiang and left. When she reached the back door, Han Yunqi saw the carriage. This guy wasn't taking her flying this time? She seemed to like the feeling of flying. What was she thinking? Han Yunqi shook her head and got into the carriage. She saw Long Fei Yi leaning lazily with one hand supporting his head. She found a place to the side and also leaned lazily. She thought, let's go. Who's afraid of who? No matter what, you have to be responsible for bringing this Wang Fei back safe and sound. Who knew that Long Fei Yi would raise his eyes to look at her and then order coldly, take a shortcut to Snake Valley first? Snake Valley? Han Yunqi had a very bad premonition in her heart. Chapter 57. The stable carriage sped along without any bumps. If it wasn't for the sound of the wind, Han Yunqi wouldn't have known the carriage was moving so fast. Only she and Long Fei Yi were inside the carriage. Long Fei Yi had only spared her a glance since she got on, before closing his eyes again without a word. Han Yunqi was naturally bold. Even in front of the emperor, she dared to argue. But for some reason, she always felt timid before this man's iciness. She wanted to ask him about Snake Gorge, but seeing him close his eyes, she didn't. Unconsciously, she began to size him up timidly. His features looked like they'd been carved by the heavens themselves. Narrow eyes, a high nose, and thin lips, they were all perfect and flawless. Han Yunqi never thought that such a cold man existed in this world. Even when he was quiet, his entire body emanated a coldness that kept people at arm's length, forcing them to stay at a respectful distance. Was he like this since he was young? He was so cold to Grand Concubine Yi, but what about the late emperor? In this world, was there anyone who had ever seen his warm side, who had ever seen him smile from the bottom of his heart? Thinking up to here, she couldn't help but wonder if a woman would appear to receive his lifetime's promise and love. But soon enough, Han Yunqi smiled. She really was overthinking things. Would such a cold and emotionless man have feelings? Dismissing these distracting thoughts, Han Yunqi averted her gaze and leaned lazily to one side. She'd better figure out what kind of place Snake Gorge was. Why did she feel like this guy had brought her out with the scent of a conspiracy? At this moment, Long Fei Yi slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Han Yunqi. It was only a faint glance before he closed them again. The carriage traveled through the night until the next morning. As soon as Han Yunqi opened her eyes, she met Long Fei Yi's icy gaze. She jumped in fright and quickly sat up. You're awake? Long Fei Yi asked. What are you doing? Han Yunqi was so fierce. Why was this guy so close? Long Fei Yi pushed her away, a look of disdain flashing in his eyes. I wanted to wake you up. All right. Han Yunqi calmed down. Have we arrived? What kind of place was Snake Valley? Were there a lot of poisonous snakes? Is that why you brought me along? Han Yunqi thought about it over and over again last night. Other than this reason, this guy had no reason to bring her out. There's only one venomous snake, and its snake core is what Gu Qishao wants the most. If we exchange the snake core for a lifeblood pill, he'll definitely give it to us, Long Fei Yi explained. So it turned out. All right, this guy was indeed omnipotent. He could even find out about this. With this information, it would not be difficult to obtain the lifeblood pill. Of course, the crux of this matter was her. Han Yunqi's self-confidence grew a bit. She wasn't afraid of venomous snakes and whatnot. Let's go. Take me to see what kind of poisonous snake it is. Han Yunqi was brimming with confidence as she jumped off the carriage. Just as she was about to walk forward, Long Fei Yi's words caused her to stop abruptly. It's a poisonous python. What? Han Yunqi abruptly turned her head, her brows furrowed. It's a poisonous python. Long Fei Yi patiently repeated. If it was an ordinary poisonous snake, he would not have brought her along. Bringing a woman along on a journey would cause all kinds of trouble. Poisonous python, Han Yunshi muttered to herself. This time, she was completely shocked. One had to know that pythons were not poisonous. Poisonous snakes had front and back teeth that could secrete nerve venom. They could inject the venom into their prey's body, causing their prey to die before swallowing it. However, pythons did not have the ability to attack with venom. Their attack was to use force to bind their prey and strangle it to death before swallowing it. But the pythons here were actually poisonous, and they were even giant pythons? Han Yunshi was at a loss. She searched through the detoxification system, but there were no relevant records at all. Without a doubt, this poisonous python was a completely new species to her. Seeing her pale face, Long Fei asked, "Is there a problem? How big is this snake?" Han Yunshi asked. "It's about 3 zhang long. Moreover, it's agile and can spit out poisonous gas." Long Fei answered truthfully. According to his understanding, there were many people who had designs on this poisonous python, but until now, no one had been able to capture it. The number of people who died in the Snake Valley was not small. 3 zhang, that was 10 meters. It was also agile and could spit out poisonous gas. Wasn't it a demon? Hearing this, Han Yunshi's face became even more unsightly. She made a prompt decision. I can't handle this. I can't cure the poison of the poisonous python. You have to think of other ways. She was unarmed. If she could not cure the poison, once she got close to the poisonous python, she would either be poisoned to death or strangled to death. Why? Long Fei did not understand. There are thousands of kinds of poisons in the world, and I'm not omnipotent. Han Yunshi generously admitted. Long Fei had not personally come here. He originally thought that bringing Han Yunshi, this poisonous woman, would make things easier. Now, he hesitated. Who knew that at this time, the horse beside him suddenly raised its front hooves and neighed in fright. Not good, Long Fei coldly said. Before his voice fell, he saw a huge snake head suddenly fly out from the forest on the right side, spitting out poisonous gas. In the blink of an eye, Long Fei grabbed Han Yunshi and retreated in the direction of the valley. But very soon, a giant snake's tail lashed out at them like a whip. Long Fei had no choice but to retreat into the valley. Very quickly, the giant python's entire body was exposed. It was like a huge sword, chasing after them at high speed. Long Fei was vigilant of the surrounding movements as he sped forward to escape. Han Yunshi was held tightly in his arms as she gaped at the sight. When Long Fei told her about it, she didn't have such a direct impression, but now that she saw it for herself, she was given a fright. This snake was so terrifying. There were several times when the poisonous gas almost hit her body, but her detoxification system did not prompt her. Once again, this proved that this poison was unfamiliar. If Han Yunshi had enough time to collect samples, she could still research the antidote. Unfortunately, her life was at stake now. The deeper they went into the valley, the denser the trees became. As a result, their risk factor was even higher. Long Fei kept moving forward at a terrifying speed. Han Yunshi thought that since he entered the valley, this guy should be trying to escape from the other exit as soon as possible. But suddenly, Long Fei changed direction. Carrying Han Yunshi, he fled into the dense forest on the right. You don't plan on leaving the valley? Han Yunshi was shocked. This prince is here for the snake pill, Long Fei said. Compared to this poisonous giant python, Medicine Ghost Valley's Gu Qisha was more difficult to deal with. He did not have the leisure to ask for medicine. Since he had entered Snake Valley, he definitely would not empty-handed. The poisonous giant python seemed to be surprised by Long Fei's actions. It stopped for a moment, but then disappeared into the dense forest. Seeing this, Han Yunshi did not have time to persuade Long Fei. She shouted, "That thing disappeared." Long Fei made a prompt decision to fly upwards. At the same time, the poison python pounced on empty air. What a close shave. This was a competition of speed. Soon, the poisonous giant python disappeared again. Long Fei landed on the tallest tree. With one hand around Han Yunshi's waist and the other on the tree trunk, he looked down at the entire valley. Although Han Yunshi was afraid, This was the first time she was looking down at the world from such a high place. She felt a surge of emotions and was extremely excited. Although nothing good came out of going out with this guy, it was always exciting. She knew that it was impossible for him to escape. If he wanted to escape, he would have done so long ago. Since they were already here, they might as well throw caution to the wind and fight with the poisonous giant python. Who knows, they might really be able to get the snake pill. Look, over there. Han Yunqi's eyes were sharp. She quickly saw the movement in the forest. Because of the poisonous giant python's existence, the animals in Snake Valley had either died or escaped. Such a large movement could only be caused by the poisonous giant python. Long Fei looked over and brought Han Yunqi to the bottom right branch of a tree. "Stand properly," he said coldly. Han Yunqi immediately hugged the tree trunk tightly. She had to admit that once he let go, her sense of security disappeared. Long Fei did not hold onto the tree trunk. He stood firmly in the middle of the tree branch. His body was tall and straight like a pine tree. He held the crossbow with both hands and aimed his cold gaze at the constantly moving undulations. Han Yunqi looked at him from the side. She only felt that this man was extremely cool. No matter how she looked at him, he looked like a top-notch dark assassin. Suddenly, the movement in the thicket came to an abrupt stop. The poisonous python stopped. Long Fei slowly narrowed his eyes. The constantly moving crossbow also stopped in one direction. The arrow was knocked on the string and could be released at any time. Han Yunqi nervously held her breath. But who knew that just when she thought that Long Fei would release the arrow, he suddenly turned around and aimed at a direction behind him. He quickly released the arrow. Shio! What a sharp sound. She only saw that the arrow was like a bolt of lightning. Its momentum was powerful and its speed was astonishing. Even though the arrow had already flown out, Han Yunqi could still feel the powerful force on the arrow. She did not expect that this guy would actually pour his internal energy into the arrow. But why did he change direction? While Han Yunqi was still trying to figure it out, Long Fei had already shot out countless arrows, each of them as swift as a meteor shower. Like a bolt of lightning, they contained boundless power. When the huge snake tail swung out from the thicket, Han Yunqi finally understood. Long Fei had just given up on the snake tail and shot the snake head. If she guessed correctly, the poisonous giant python's head was already seriously injured, which restricted its movements. With a head injury, it would be difficult for it to escape with its huge body and snake tail. This shooting might seem simple, but if it was someone else, they might not be able to escape from the poisonous giant python's pursuit. Secondly, even if they were able to stand high up and shoot arrows, they might not be able to hit every single one of them and seriously injure the poisonous giant python. Han Yunqi knew that every arrow that Long Fei shot contained a huge amount of power. Otherwise, a small crossbow arrow compared to the giant python's body was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. Long Fei had already stopped, but the veins on the back of his hands had not disappeared. The huge snake tail swung crazily in the air, and very quickly, the surrounding trees were all razed to the ground. Han Yunqi estimated that the snake tail would not affect the tree they were on. She was relieved and looked towards the snake head with Long Fei. As long as the snake head was dead, no matter how big the movement of the snake tail was, it would just be struggling at death's door. They waited. Long Fei took out his crossbow again. However, at this moment, there was a huge movement in the direction of the snake head. It seemed that the snake head was making its final struggle. But not long later, the movement gradually disappeared. He's finally dead? Han Yunqi asked timidly. Long Fei did not reply. His eyes were filled with caution as he continued to wait. Who knew that at this moment, a white figure suddenly leapt down from the tree not too far away and charged towards the poisonous giant python's head. Han Yunqi saw it clearly. It was a white-robed lady. What guts, to actually dare to reap the benefits in front of Long Fei. Chapter 58. To dare to snatch something from Long Fei, this white-robed lady must be tired of living. Han Yunqi was just thinking about this when she saw a white poisonous fog suddenly sprayed out from the forest and almost headed straight for that lady. Be careful, it's poisonous. Suddenly, Long Fei cried out in alarm, and in an instant, his figure flashed as he dashed downwards. Was he going to stop her, or to save her? Based on his character, shouldn't he snort coldly, "Serves you right," or "Seeking death"? Han Yunshi was stunned as she looked on in disbelief. Very quickly, she confirmed that she hadn't seen wrongly, and that cry of alarm earlier, she didn't seem to have heard wrongly. She had never thought that Long Fei would also have times when he was anxious. Who was that white-robed lady? Long Fei's speed was so fast that one couldn't see him clearly with their eyes. All they could see was a black shadow flashing past, and when they saw him again, he had already hugged the white-robed lady and flew towards the opposite tree. Han Yunshi's heart gave a start at the sight of the two figures leaning against each other, but she quickly dismissed the thought. The white poisonous fog dissipated, and the forest regained its tranquility. No one knew if that snake's head was dead or not. Han Yunshi looked from afar and saw that Long Fei and that lady seemed to be talking about something. Unfortunately, the distance was too far, and she wasn't able to see that lady's appearance clearly. Secondly, she wasn't able to hear their voices. Who was that lady, and what was her relationship with Long Fei? Just as Han Yunshi was puzzling over this, the ground suddenly shook, and she saw that the poisonous huge python in the forest was actually flipping its body. As its body flipped, that huge snake tail swung towards the tree that Han Yunshi was in. Seeing the huge snake tail approaching, Han Yunshi didn't know what to do and instinctively looked towards Long Fei. Long Fei was just about to come over when who knew that white-robed lady suddenly flew downwards towards the huge python's head. "Come back!" Long Fei shouted. However, the woman in white turned around and glanced at her with a hint of provocation in her eyes. Instead, she sped up and flew down. At this moment, the snake's tail slammed heavily on the trunk of the big tree that Han Yunshi was standing on. Bang! A loud sound was heard. Han Yunshi was terrified. It was more than 10 meters high. She would die if she didn't jump. Instinctively, she hugged the trunk of the tree, hoping that the tree would fall slowly. Unexpectedly, the poisonous python's huge tail actually swung over again. Bang! Although Han Yunshi hugged the tree trunk tightly, the impact was so strong that she couldn't even hold on to it. She subconsciously let go of her grip and fell straight down. Long Fei was watching all of this. A complicated look flitted past his eyes before he turned to chase after the white-robed lady. Han Yunshi fell in a straight line on all fours. She didn't see Long Fei turn his head, but she was very clear in her heart that with his speed, he would have saved her long ago if he wanted to. But he didn't come. He never came. She didn't know when she'd hit the ground, or if it would hurt when she did. Han Yunshi closed her eyes, her voice choked with sobs. "Long Fei, you bastard. I'll hate you even if I die." As Han Yunshi fell, Long Fei had already caught up to the white-robed lady and kicked her away from the python. "Duanmu Yao, have some sense of propriety," he said coldly. "I thought Big Brother Fei wouldn't care about Yao Yao's life or death after getting married." Duanmu Yao's white robes made her look like a celestial maiden from the 9 heavens. When she smiled, her dimples flickered in and out, adding to her cuteness. She was the princess of Western Zhou, an ally of Tianing country and Long Fei's junior sister. "Your lordship will say it one last time. Scram immediately, or else I won't be polite," Long Fei said coldly. He glanced to the right and saw Han Yunshi about to hit the ground. Duanmu Yao arched a brow. "Big Brother Fei, do you think my life or your Wang Fei's is more important?" As she spoke, she actually wanted to fly towards the poisonous python's head. She was clearly threatening Long Fei with her life. Long Fei's eyes flashed with rage. "If you want to die, then your lordship can send you on your way when you're 18 years old." So speaking, he kicked viciously at Duanmu Yao. On one hand, he sent her flying far away into the distant thickets, while on the other, he used her body as leverage to speed himself towards Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi was in despair. Although her eyes were closed and her back was to the ground, she could clearly feel that she was about to hit the ground. Was this what it felt like to jump off a building? Soon enough, the back of her head would hit the ground hard, causing brain matter to splatter everywhere. Would all her limbs be smashed to pieces? Who said there was no need to be afraid with him around? Who said there wouldn't be any unexpected mishaps? A single tear silently slid from the corner of her eye. She gritted her teeth and opened her eyes. Even if she was going to die, she'd take one last look at this world. But who knew that the moment she opened her eyes, she would see a handsome face that angered both men and gods. It was as cold as ice, like a carved sculpture. His eyes were as deep as a cold lake, and his lips were as thin as a cicada's wings. So familiar, yet so unfamiliar. Long Fei. Han Yunshi couldn't help but smile. Was this a hallucination right before her death? She didn't expect that she was still hoping that he would come and save her. Long Fei leaned down and grabbed Han Yunshi's waist, slowly spinning her down. Han Yunshi only felt that this hallucination was very real, yet so beautiful that it felt like a beautiful dream. Everything between heaven and earth seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them. She forgot her fear, forgot her hatred, and indulged herself in his eyes that were as deep as the sea. Unconsciously, she reached out and gently caressed his cheek. Who knew that at this moment, Long Fei's handsome brows suddenly furrowed, and his cold eyes became even colder. At this moment, Han Yunshi woke up with a start. This guy could furrow his brows. This guy was real. She was so shocked that she was dumbstruck. Her hand froze on his face, and the moment he landed with her, he let go of her hand and slapped away her hand on his cheek in disgust. Han Yunshi didn't even have time to react before her legs gave way, and she fell to the ground. Finally, the fall woke her up. Thinking about how she had lost her composure just now, Han Yunshi instantly blushed. She was so embarrassed that she forgot to get up. Long Fei's face was gloomy as he looked down disdainfully, but he still reached out to pull her up. Han Yunshi's face was completely red. Looking at his large hand, a trace of warmth flowed through her heart. Just as she was about to reach out, who knew that Long Fei would say cold, troublesome? The moment he said this, Han Yunshi's hand froze, and she quickly retracted it. A trace of disappointment flashed across her eyes, and then she became angry. She didn't say she wanted to come along. He was the one who'd forced her here to treat the snake's poison. She'd suffered such a fright, but she hadn't even reprimanded him. Instead, he was disdaining her first. She'd even felt warmth in her heart, but now it looked like it was all one-sided wishful thinking. Just then, he'd chosen someone else in the face of life and death. Now he'd come to save her because he was afraid he'd have a hard time explaining things to Emperor Tianhui. Han Yunshi pushed her hands against the ground to push herself up. She glared at Long Fei and said, "My life is cheap. I'm trouble. You brought this trouble on yourself. Bring this Wang Fei back the same way you brought me out. If I lose a single hair, this Wang Fei won't be able to treat the crown prince." Long Fei's disgusted expression stiffened before he said coldly, "Don't be such a coward. You still have your life." So speaking, he avoided Han Yunshi's glare and turned to look at the struggling poison python. It was still spitting out white poison mist, but there wasn't as much of it as before. It was obvious that it was struggling at death's door. Han Yunshi was at a loss for words. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. She decided not to say anything. She was puzzled. Where'd that white-robed woman go? Did she leave? That woman was focused on the snake's head. If she wasn't here to steal the snake core, then what was she here for? She and Long Fei knew each other, right? Just then, Long Fei was clearly afraid she'd be poisoned and wanted to save her. Han Yunshi was curious, but more than that, she was angry. Did Long Fei know that she'd die as soon as he arrived? For better or for worse, he was the one who'd brought her out. Did he treat her life like dirt? Long Fei waited for the poison python to die. Han Yunshi simply sat cross-legged at the side without saying a word. If it wasn't for the fear of the poison python's poison, with Long Fei's ability, he'd probably have gotten the snake core long ago. Now they could only wait for the poison python to exhaust its energy. However, not long after, Long Fei became impatient. He leapt onto a small tree and took out his crossbow. He aimed at the position where the white poison mist was coming out and launched another attack. Swish, swish, swish. Arrows flew down one after another. Not only did the power not weaken, it was even stronger than before. Blood splattered everywhere. Han Yunshi was frightened by this, and only then did she realize this fellow's anger. He was very unhappy and was clearly venting his anger. If she didn't have a bargaining chip in her hand, would she become the target of his anger? Thinking of this, Han Yunqi's hair stood on end. She thought that her previous rebuttal shouldn't have made this fellow so angry. She was always insignificant in his eyes. It should be that white-clothed girl who provoked him. Han Yunqi obviously didn't want to be so curious, but she didn't know why she became curious again. Although she knew that he wouldn't tell her, she still wanted to ask. Han Yunqi was conflicted. All right, she was still angry and had a cold war with him. Don't ask. Even if Long Fei Ye's attack was so fierce, this poison python was after all a huge python that had lived for many years. It wouldn't die so easily. The huge snake tail was still swaying crazily. That bloody snake head even jumped up a few times and sprayed a circle of white poison mist around it. Seeing this, Long Fei became more and more impatient. He jumped down from the short tree and walked forward to find a better position to attack. Han Yunqi looked at his back view. Her face was gloomy and she didn't say a word. She thought to herself, surnamed Long, just leave. Go far away. If he left her here alone and something happened later, he would be responsible for it. Unexpectedly, Long Fei had only taken a few steps when he turned back. He looked down at Han Yunqi and ordered, "Get up." "What?" Han Yunqi asked curiously. Unexpectedly, Long Fei didn't answer her. Instead, he suddenly pulled her up and hugged her tightly. He flew into the sky and flew to a tree about 7 to 8 meters tall. Ah! Han Yunqi screamed all the way to the top of the tree. She had almost died from the fall just now. She probably wouldn't dare to climb a tree for a year. Long Fei impatiently said sternly, "What are you screaming for?" Han Yunqi turned around and buried her head in his arms. Her arms wrapped around him tightly. She was scared and angry. "Long Fei, I'm warning you. If you leave me alone on a tree again, I'll definitely. Long Fei waited. However, Han Yunqi's brain short-circuited. After saying definitely for a while, she said, "I'll definitely not let you off." Long Fei was stunned. He lowered his head and saw that the person in his arms was actually trembling. Unexpectedly, his lips curled up slightly and a faint smile appeared on his face. No one must have told him that when he smiled, the whole world would be overshadowed in an instant. That was because no one had ever seen such a pure smile on his face. Allowing Han Yunqi to hug him tightly, Long Fei held the crossbow with both hands and aimed at the snake's wide-open mouth. Swoosh! The arrow pierced through the mouth. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.